Good afternoon, and welcome to the Royal Aeronautical Society. I am Chris Khan, President of the Society, and I am pleased that you can join us, whether in person or online, to this President's event to mark International Women's Day. This year's global campaign theme is Inspire Inclusion, and this event will aim to do just that. Last year, I became only the second woman in 158 years to hold this position as president. And I am acutely aware of the significantly disproportionate number of women, not just in leadership roles, but across all levels of the aerospace, aviation, and space sectors worldwide. And whilst there has been increased advocacy, pledges, charters, and various initiatives to accelerate positive change over many years, women everywhere still continue to face adversities in the workplace that are barriers to feeling supported, valued, and included. So what do? We try to fix ourselves. We lean in. We power dress. We strengthen our handshake. We stand up tall. We practice being more assertive. We show less emotion. We lower our voice. We take up space. We learn to multitask so we can balance being 100% full-time carer in some cases and 100% full-time employee with 200% burnout. And yet still, we haven't solved the problem. Why? Because we are not the problem to solve. This is the most powerful and striking mindset shift that I took away from a fellow Global Future Council member of the World Economic Forum, Reshma Saujani, who you'll be hearing from in a few minutes.
Indeed.
But this idea that if we fix ourselves, we will achieve gender equality. We will have equal opportunities for promotions and equal pay as our male counterparts. We need to stop. We need to stop. We need to focus on fixing or redesigning the environment and structures that were traditionally never designed in the first place for us. So today, we're going to shift our mindset. This year's theme is Inspire Inclusion. I want us to draw out what is blocking us from inclusion. What are the systemic, institutional, and organizational structures, cultures, mindsets, and policies that need to be changed, transformed, and redesigned, or even designed in the first place for women to not just be included, but to thrive in the workplace? We're going to bring to the surface and boldly face topics that have often been swept under the rug and overlooked as we practice our power stance. Now, I know we will want to unpack our lived experiences, but I want us to use the time today wisely, to have constructive dialogue and draw out tangible actions, not necessarily for us to take for ourselves, but for our industries to take to help address real-world challenges faced by women in the workplace today. I want you to leave here feeling informed, equipped, confident, inspired, and empowered. We have a great lineup of speakers for you today, and together we will delve into addressing harassment in the male-dominated workplace, including sexual harassment and bullying. I wish I didn't have to put this topic on this agenda, but I am astounded by the number of women who have had to face this in the workplace and continue to do so. I read a study that said women are 3 times more likely than men to experience sexual harassment in the workplace. But in male-dominated workplaces, like our industries, women are nearly 6 times more likely to experience this. Let me take you into a room where no one can hear you scream. This is how I was invited by my line manager to do my very first performance review as a graduate engineer and the only woman in the team. This was my welcome to this industry. That was only part of a campaign of harassment, threats, and inappropriate behaviours I faced in industry. And when I finally found the courage to seek help with HR, I was met with, "Why do we only have this problem with you?" I later found out many other young female graduates faced the same issue and received the same response. And what was the solution to the problem? Move the problem from the team, promote the manager, and protect the company's reputation. From the onset of our careers, we're being told we're the problem. But today, we're going to challenge that. We're going to unpack organizational duty of care for women professionals who have such traumatic experiences. What frameworks, processes, safe, non-judgmental reporting mechanisms are in place that actually help women feel heard and supported, and not just told, "You must face your aggressor." We'll dive into the gender pay gap and the gender promotion gap. Women often shy away from pursuing fair remuneration and promotion opportunities. But you know what? We shouldn't even have to. Many women in an organization I work for put in that extra work, met the required competencies, was more qualified, and had more experience than male counterparts, interviewed and was turned down. But the men were tapped on the shoulder and told, "It's time for your pay rise and promotion, and you'll be back paid for the delay." And yet we wonder why we have less women in leadership roles. We will be diving into the impact of disproportionate care responsibilities that women often take on, and the resulting time poverty and burnout they experience. Many women face the career versus childcare, time and cost question. Yet because of this free care provision we take on and our contributions to society, women remain essential to a thriving global economy, according to the World Economic Forum, and well, common sense. Before introducing the first session, I have a few housekeeping announcements. So, there will not be a fire alarm test in the building today. Therefore, if the alarm sounds, please exit the building. The Society's designated assembly point is a paved and railed area at the junction of Hamilton Place and Piccadilly, beyond the Intercontinental Hotel, and the Royal Aeronautical Society staff would be on hand to guide you. If you have mobility or access issues, please make yourself known to a member of the event staff so they can make necessary arrangements for the safe exit from the building in case of an emergency. Please don't leave any unmarked bags or other items unattended, and please, if you can, switch off mobile phones, or switch it to silent, during the session. The event is being recorded and will be available to view on YouTube post-event. And after the presentations, there will be an opportunity for questions. So please raise your hand and wait for the microphone if you would like to ask a question. And for those who are online, please post questions for the speakers in the Q&A or chat function on the webinar platform, and I'll be able to pick them up. The event will close at 6 o'clock, but we will be having a networking drinks reception in the Marshall of Cambridge room. So, like many other events that I go to around this time, every single year, we have drinks, we have champagne, we pat ourselves on the back, and we ignore things that women still face. Today's event is going to be different. So, let's get into it. I'd like to invite Christine, Chair of the Society's Women in Aerospace and Aviation and Space, or WASC Committee, a mouthful, to say a few words before our first session.
Thank you, Carissa. Always a tough act to follow. Have I got the slides, Lauren? Or do you doing them? Oh, there we go. Great, thank you. Well, as Carissa said, my name is Christine Matthews. I've served just over 21 years in the Royal Air Force as an aero systems engineer. I'm just about to embark on a new challenge. I'm also mum to a 7-year-old Polly. And for the last year or so, I've chaired the Royal Aeronautical Society's Women in Aviation, Aerospace and Space Committee, or WASC for short. Carissa also talked about why we wanted to cover some fairly difficult topics today, and she shared a little bit of her lived experience. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more personal reflections from our fantastic speakers and taking some positive action from that, as Carissa described. But as my little warm-up act, rather than giving you an overview of the aircraft that I've worked on and the places that I've been, I wanted to share a bit of a more personal journey, which touches, I think, on all of the themes we want to cover today. So when I was younger, she says in a room full of mainly women, I wasn't very good with girls, probably because I didn't fit in with the popular girls at school who just terrified me. I was used to boys, trusted them, probably adopted some of their behaviours. Maybe that was just me. And I was one of the few girls in maths and science at school, in university, and through my early career. And it didn't faze me. I didn't feel knocked back. I didn't feel unsupported because of my gender. I didn't see any problems. But eventually I realised that barriers, inequalities, and inequities still exist. People experience them differently, or maybe not at all. If we're privileged enough not to have encountered any serious issues, then whatever our gender and identity, we must still support and advocate for one another. I still feel quite embarrassed and guilty about how ignorant I was until I hit some problems myself. Now, as a mom, I try to instill in my daughter how important being kind to each other is. In fact, her school rules are, 1, be kind. 2, be kind. 3, be kind. I want her and her girlfriends to support each other, not tear each other down. And I don't want them to be afraid to be kind, to compromise, to listen, to show humility. But I think women in the workplace can face a double bind. If we're kind, we might think we're going to be seen as, or maybe we are seen as, soft, underconfident. And I think that can get associated wrongly with your professional capability. If a woman is strong and confident, then we're in danger of being labelled a bitch or difficult sooner or later. I feel I've experienced both. Starting my professional career with a naivety that probably put me the wrong side of the fine line between confidence and arrogance, if I'm honest. And that didn't really hold me back, at least at first. As time went on, especially when I became a parent, my style softened, perhaps underpinned by genuine confidence at that point, being comfortable knowing that I had weaknesses and flaws, not being afraid to ask questions or for help, and feeling less need to put on a front. But I realised that even with the protection that I had of wearing a rank in my job and the authority that afforded me, certain people were becoming dismissive of my views and ideas. Now, when I was younger, I think I put that down to being younger. But this time I started to question my own ability and assertiveness. I grew frustrated and insecure in equal measure. I tried to channel my youthful assertiveness, but I was labelled emotional. Throw in some narcissistic bullies, very high-pressured and politically charged work environment, and new mum sleep deprivation, and before I knew it, I was burnt out. The reaction of my organisation was to remove me from my role, treating the symptoms but ignoring all of the things that have caused them. I felt like I'd been sidelined, and more dramatically, like all I'd ever worked for in my professional career was now over. And there were those problems that I hadn't seen, until they whack me around the head. Inappropriate behaviours, the pressure of balancing work and parenthood. And I should say that my husband and I split the childcare pretty equally. Not knowing what I could do to help myself, my male allies not knowing what they could do to help me. And an impact on my mental health, the system that penalised me, a delay in my next promotion, and there's a gap. And it was only with hindsight that I realised that my gender probably played some part in all of this. Now, I'm grateful because I've ended up happier and stronger, as we often do after tricky times, both personally and professionally. I learned an awful lot, and my career wasn't over. Now, everyone's personal experience is different, and sharing lived experiences is powerful. For the listener, the solidarity, perhaps personal practical tips for now or to store away in future, either for yourself or for a colleague. Or maybe there's inspiration about what your organisation could do. For the storyteller, there's solidarity too, and an opportunity to help and inspire others. So I hope that's what you're going to get lots of today. Solidarity, learning, and inspiration to improve inclusion. I hope you'll feel better equipped to personally deal with challenges, help others, and help your organisations to make systemic changes. I am so grateful to all of our speakers and really looking forward to learning and getting inspired by you. Now, the WASC's mission is ongoing, and we will take forward the output of today's conference, particularly the roundtable sessions that we're going to have at the end. And we're going to ask all of you, both in the room and online, to tell us what support you would like from your places of work and organisations like the Society. So I'll be back briefly at the end, if we've got time hopefully, to talk a little bit about the Alta mentoring platform and how you can get involved in the WASC. But now I'm going to hand back to Carissa to introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, please. Thank you, Christine. So our first speaker is Reshma Saujani, the founder of Girls Who Code and CEO of Moms First. I do a longer introduction during the video, so I'll spare you from doing it twice. So if we can run the video now, thanks. We're pleased to be joined virtually by Reshma Saujani. Reshma is a leading activist and the founder of Girls Who Code and founder and CEO of Moms First, formerly Marshall Plan for Moms. She is the author of the instant bestseller, Pay Up, The Future of Women and Work, and Why It's Different Than You Think. She has spent more than a decade building movements to fight for women and girls' economic empowerment, working to close the gender gap in the tech sector, and most recently advocating for policies to support mums impacted by the pandemic. Reshma is also the author of the international bestseller, Brave, Not Perfect, and her influential TED Talk, Teach Girls Bravery, Not Perfection, has more than 5 million views globally. Reshma, welcome. In your own words, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor. I always stand first and foremost a mother. I have 2 sons, Sean and Sai, and it's the proudest title that I wear. I'm the daughter of refugees. You know, my parents were expelled from Uganda in 1973. And, you know, they came to the United States. We're fortunate to be 2 of 1,000 refugees who got status to come to the United States. And, you know, they were both trained engineers, but my mother sold cosmetics. My father worked as a machinist in a plant. And, you know, they taught me a lot about using your voice, right, to fight for others who don't have a voice. And so I led my first march when I was 13, and I've been marching and fighting for women ever since.
Fantastic. Now, you wrote a book, Brave, Not Perfect, which is based on your TED Talk. And I love this TED Talk. Your views must have gone up by quite a bit, because I kept rewatching it because the messages just kept resonating with me. Now, what inspired this, and why do you think this message is so important?
Yeah, so I got an email one day from TED and saying, we'd love for you to come and speak. Now, if you're a public speaker and you get an email from TED, it's like being invited, you know, to like a really big football game. And You have this once in a lifetime opportunity. And for me, like I said, I've been fighting for women and girls my whole life. And I wanted to say, what can I say that can really shift the conversation? And, I remember thinking about my Girls Who Code students. So, we have girls from, we teach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of girls to code. And when they come to our programs, that first week, none of them have ever coded before. And I remember Girls Who Code teachers would tell me the same story, regardless of where they lived, about girls' experience that first week. And it went something like this. During that first week when girls are learning how to code, a student will call her teacher over and she'll say, I don't know what code to write. And the teacher will look at her computer screen and she'll see a blank text editor. So if she didn't know any better, she thought that the student spent the past 20 minutes just staring at the screen. Yeah. When the teacher pressed undo a few times, she saw that the student actually wrote code and then deleted it. So instead of showing the progress that she made, she rather showed nothing at all. Perfection or bust. Mm-hmm. I tell the story on the TED stage and I walk off and I am inundated by women who say, I do this too. Yes. My dad saying, my daughter does this too. And it didn't matter whether you were a doctor, a lawyer, a dancer, an artist, somewhere along the line, you had learned to delete the code of your life. Fantastic. What I mean by that is somewhere along the line, you had learned to give up before you even tried. And so that really inspired me to write Brave Not Perfect. And I went on a mission to understand, well, is that true? Are we conditioned for perfectionism? When does that start? When does it end? You know what I mean? What are the tools that we can put into place that can orientate us towards bravery? And, I went on a movement that I'm still on, a bravery movement, I call it, right? To basically help women unlearn perfectionism and orient ourselves towards kind of everyday bravery.
Fantastic. Be so interested in that because it's a comment I get from my boss quite a lot, which is, it doesn't need to be perfect. We need to find a way to break the perfectionism in you. What you've done, it's good enough and it's better than, the standard is so high, but you're such a perfectionist. We need to find a way to unlearn that. So I'd be really keen to find out more about.
Yes, I mean, I think that's right because we're conditioned for it, right? We're, when I talk about this in my book, it's like, we're coddled, right? We tell our daughters, be careful, honey, don't swing too high. Did you take that toy away from her? Give it back. And we're wrapped in bubble wrap because we're physically protected, and that physical protection extends to emotional protection. So around 8 or 9, if we go to a gymnastics class and we can't do a cartwheel, and we come home crying, our parents will be like, oh, it's okay. You don't have to go again. Mm-hmm. Let's try something else. And so we never get comfortable with failure. We never get comfortable with making mistakes, right? And the implications of that are that we overdo things, right? Like the test I give women is, send an email today with a typo in it. And they freak out, right? That idea probably is freaking you out right now because so quickly go from having a typo in an email means that we're not smart, that we're not qualified, that we're going to get fired. Like we just spiral. Mm-hmm. And the amount of time that we spend, right, overdoing things, it's time that we don't have for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. And I think it also reflects in how we apply for jobs, right? If women don't meet all of the criteria, if we're not the perfect exact fit, we won't apply. Whereas it's not the same for men. If they tick a few boxes, they're brave enough to go for it and take that risk. You talk a lot about resilience. So to build on what you were just saying about women being conditioned, we aren't conditioned for failure in the same way as men are. With respect to resilience, what's the impact of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Like I always say that failure is such a gift. In Silicon Valley, it's like you can't even get funding unless you've had 3 failed startups, right? And I think about I love sports. I think about Serena Williams, who I love, and she sits at the edge of her ability, and a coach who says, "Do it again, do it again, do it again." Like you can't become great, unless you do it again and you don't take it personally. And that builds that ability to fail and move on, right? Builds that sense of resiliency, which is key. And I think when we have that resiliency, we do big things. I built Girls Who Code when I'd run for office and I had lost like spectacularly. I was broke. I had pissed off the Democratic establishment. I had no contingency plan. I had nothing. I had like no money in my bank account. And, but when I woke up the next day, I remember thinking like, wow, like I'm not broken. I had thought for so long in my life that if I tried something and I failed at it, that it would literally physically break me. And so I wouldn't bother. And so that loss of that first political race was such an eye opener, right? That like, oh, like I could learn so much from that loss and go on to fight another day. And it's really what inspired me to build Girls Who Code, and so much of my life, right, are built around these big failures, either professional or personal, that has built an enormous sense of resiliency. It's helped me, I think, build the movements that I'm building right now, and also kind of been a teacher. I think far too often we hold a lot of shame about failure.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's that shame that prevents us from like trying to do things that we just don't know if they're going to work out or not.
Yeah.
But we miss out on the joy, on the other end. So I feel like so much of my duty on this earth, in this lifetime, is to make sure that I'm sharing kind of that vulnerability, that shame, right? That I do this thing on Instagram called, Failure Friday, where I kind of, very publicly share what I failed at that week. And, I get so many notes from people about how much it helps them feel seen and feel comfortable in facing their own.
Oh, that is fantastic. I like that because we're so used to seeing perfectionism on social media, and being able to just strip that back and say, behind all of that, there's something real here. And to be able to fail and still be successful is a fantastic message to send. You created Moms First, a non-profit campaign fighting for structural changes for America's mothers, including affordable childcare, paid leave, and equal pay for mums. Now, please tell us how you got the idea and about the work you're doing and how it's benefiting women.
So I woke up, in the beginning of the year in 2020, and Girls Who Code had just had a Super Bowl ad. We were on top of the world. I was having my second son finally after years and years and years of fertility and miscarriages. And I was so excited to like take time off to be with my baby, to be with my family, to step away from work, and kind of celebrate, right, the wins I've had. My son was born on January 25th, and the world shut down, that first week of March. And I found myself having to go back to work, save my nonprofit from being shut down, take care of a newborn baby, and, homeschool a 6-year-old. And I was barely making it.
Yeah.
And so much of my team were all moms, and they were barely making it. And you saw like 11 million women in the United States get pushed out of the workforce because care centers were shut down and schools were shut down. And I saw so many of my students that were on their way, to major in computer science, but because their mothers were essential workers, instead of going to college and moving up that generational cycle of poverty, moving out of that generational cycle of poverty, they had to stay home and take care of their siblings. You saw how like not having a structure of care creates this cycle for women that they never get out of. And so so the United States is the only industrialized nation that doesn't have paid leave. 1 in 4 women go back to work 2 weeks after having a baby. We're the wealthiest nation that puts the least amount of money into childcare, and we pay moms, basically 68 cents on every dollar made by dads, right? So I realized that like I could teach millions of girls to code, but if I didn't help their mothers, I had not solved anything. So I stepped down as the CEO of Girls Who Code, and started Moms First, to really, again, like you said, fight for structural change for, paid leave passed in America and on the globe, childcare and pay equity. And I just, of course, I have this big aha moment, right? That like, for so long, we've been buying into what I call the big lie. So just we've been telling women that, well, that the problem is you, that only if we fixed you, we'll learn how to power pose, get more confidence, find a sponsor, get a mentor, right? Take another course.
Yeah.
If you could do that, right, then you can be in the corner office, then you can be president, then you can be, in parliament. And the reality is it's all been a lie, because it didn't matter what skills we had. If we live in a structure that doesn't make it possible for you to both be a mother or a caregiver, a worker, then we'll never get to equality.
Yeah.
Right? To fix is not women, it's the structure.
Exactly. And I love that shift in narrative from taking the focus off of fixing the woman and fixing the structure of the organization, and that on a with a wider lens and a broader picture, the structure of the economy as well and how we operate. Now, to you co-chair the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on the future of care economy. And we just touched on it. Care is fundamental to the functioning of an organization and on a wider perspective, an economy. And this is predominantly overlooked. Why do you think it was important to bring this issue into the mainstream?
Yeah, I got to speak at Davos, a few weeks ago, and for the first time ever on care, and talking about care and childcare as an economic issue, right? It's fundamental to our global economy. Women can't work, parents can't work, right, without available and affordable childcare. And, that's new, because for so long we've been telling families, well, you figure it out, right? If you're finding it hard to both work and have children, that's your fault. And it's never been families' fault. It's always been the job of the society, right, to create a society in which people can both work and have children, because we know declining birth rates are detrimental to innovation. People, right, to actually have children and build families. And we need women to participate in the labor market as they see fit. So for me, freedom is the ability for women to move in and out of the workforce without penalty, right? That's what to me equality means. And so what we were doing at Davos was also, proving the ROI. So we have over 140 businesses that are part of our business coalition, on childcare, and talking about the importance of companies subsidizing childcare, providing childcare, making sure childcare is passed, at the legislative level. And, when you look at the data that we're going to be releasing, in the next, few weeks, it pays for itself.
Yeah.
Real ROI in terms of attrition, in terms of, reduction in attrition, in terms of retention, in terms of productivity, in actually fixing the structure of care. So it makes economic sense.
Yes. I'm so pleased that this is being brought to the forefront. Thank you, Reshma. To wrap up, I'd like to ask you, what inspires you about this moment in time?
I think what inspires me is that I feel like we're in this really important moment where things are shifting. And the women and the girls and the moms in my life, they're coming into consciousness. They're recognizing that things can be different. They're recognizing that they have power. The men in our lives are seeing the fact that something needs to change. They themselves are wanting to kind of participate and care. 40% of my girls who co-teachers are men, right? And so we have the opportunity in society to not be divided, but to be united.
Yeah.
And I think the opportunity now is to figure out, what are the ways we do that? What are the ways that we actually come together? So again, with the work that I'm doing, there's real consensus, regardless of party, regardless of gender, regardless, that's something change. And so I spent a lot of my time bringing different people together.
Yes.
To move forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Reshma. That was a very inspiring message to leave on. And I'm so grateful for your time and for being part of our Royal Aeronautical Society event for International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was meant to be a 10-minute conversation, but really it doubled, because as you can see, a lot of them really just helpful insights from Reshma. I recommend picking up the Future of Care Economy is a new council within the World Economic Forum that I sit on. And I recommend looking at some of the material that's coming out of that and the work that Reshma is doing with that. So maybe we can send the links to that out after. And Reshma touched on, uniting and coming together with our male allies to address all of these things that we're trying to do. And Christine will share a bit more about our plans to do a deeper session on that with the WASP. So I'd like to invite to the stage our next speaker, Martine Gagnier, who is an engineer and member of the WASP, and she's an experienced engineering leader with a broad background in energy and aerospace, covering all aspects of the product lifecycle. She formerly served as the CTO at Meggitt, and leading the company's technology innovation strategy and programs. She has held a variety of roles during her 20 years at Rolls-Royce, including that of head of the Strategic Research Center and chief engineer for the industrial RB211 and Avon. Martine, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Besh. It's a great honor to be here today. I'm grateful to the team that organizes and grateful to WASP for inviting me on board and giving me this opportunity to speak in the first place. That's the only slide I've got. Engineers have a load of slides. It's liberating to not have any, so I have 0 slides. It's been great to plan this talk. While by every measure that we look at, women are terribly unrepresented in this industry, aerospace, aviation and space. I thought I've had a great career, and it was worth going back and looking at some of the history. We learn from history and define what we do in the future from that. And I thought there's some really useful lessons in there. Every decade that I've worked has brought around different learnings for me. I've used those in the workplace. I've mentored people using those learnings. And I've grown as an individual, and I've worked with my teams, and they've grown as a result of that as well. So it's been a really interesting, and thank you for the challenge, look back at 3 decades. Next year will be my 30th year in engineering, and half of that has been in the aerospace industry. And I've experienced a whole bunch of different things. I've worked as an employee, as a colleague, as a manager, as a leader. I've been a mother and a grandmother. I've been a spouse of a husband who's in the same line of work, CTO himself. And I've worked in global companies, so I've had a chance to work with different cultures in different places across 2 continents. So I think I've acquired a body of knowledge, and the beauty of getting to almost 30 years is that it's time for you to share some of that. And I'm not a comfortable public speaker. I don't do this very often. But this is a great topic to talk about because I've experienced quite a lot of things, and I like to share them with you. So first, a little bit of history. My voice is, or my accent, although I've been in the UK for 13 years now, I still go to the grocery store and I'm asked, where are you from? I live in the Midlands. People, and I have to explain, well, I'm originally from Canada, but I live in the UK and I've been here for a long, long time. So a bit of history then. I've done my schooling in Canada and worked for the first almost half of my career in that country. In 1989 is when I started my engineering course. It feels like a long time, and there's young people in the room and there's young people online. 1989 starting university means I didn't start university with a computer. And in fact, I finished my first degree and I didn't even know how to use a computer, really. So I had to go back and do a master's degree in computational fluid dynamics, so I would actually learn to use the tool. It was one of those, how could I eventually graduate from engineering and not really know how to use a computer? Well, that was then, and I know how to use a computer now, thankfully, although lack of slides might suggest otherwise. 1989 was a really important year, particularly in Canada, and particularly in engineering, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about this, even though it's not meant for drama. 1989, I'd been in my course for all of 3 months. I had made the decision to go into engineering. I didn't know what job I was going to be doing after that with that degree.
I knew it was a scientific degree and that's what I was good at. My career counselors didn't even know what engineering was about. I didn't want to be a doctor, which is where everybody else was being funneled at the time. I thought, what an adventure, let's go into engineering. Started my course. My course was a very collegiate atmosphere. We were very, very few women. We were 2 in a class of 50. It was not a great showing, but that was then. It's a bit better now. And December 6th rolled around, and the media was up in an uproar. There had been an event at l'École Polytechnique de Montréal, and it was the incredibly difficult time for students in engineering. There was a gentleman who had tried to get into l'École Polytechnique de Montréal, and failing to do that, blamed women for his lack of ability to get in the course. They were taking his place. And he walked into the École Polytechnique and he separated people by gender. It was the worst case of femicide in Canada. He shot and killed 14 women, and he injured equally as many. And it happened so fast, nobody really had managed to help. He turned the gun on himself, and that was the end of Marc Lépine as we know it today. But out of the ashes, I suppose, comes a really great want to change things. As an industry, Engineering Canada and all of the industrial bodies pulled together, I would say, and made entry into engineering that much more easy for women, and started the process of supporting them in their career. And today, has come a really, we were talking about this at WASC earlier, a really important objective of drawing into chartership and into professional engineering in the workplace, the 30 by 30 objective, which has meaning. It's not just a catchphrase. It's really drawing 30 newly chartered engineers into the workplace by 2030. And they're well on the way to achieving that, because it's a concerted effort between government, regulators of the engineering profession, industry, educational forums, and all of them pulling together with some very structured objectives and delivering on those goals. So out of that really terrible state came, what is almost a powerful course, a huge development focused on women in non-traditional careers. So finish with the difficult and the drama. Two other things. Canada in '89 opened up ground force military combat roles for women. And if one wasn't put off by following through with their engineering degree after an event, somebody telling me, oh, you shouldn't go and join the reserves because it's not for you, because it's a good lad's, summer job to have, etc. Well, it didn't take much for me to just sign up and go and do some of that training myself. And I have to credit that training for a lot of the tools that I acquired before I even launched into my career, because out of the military discipline comes teammanship, it comes with resilience, it comes with humor and self-preservation. That summer that we did our platoon training, we were 14 girls and 90 guys, and I learned a huge amount of having to, negotiate in an underrepresented area. So back to careers in engineering and careers in aerospace. I was lucky to land my first job after acquiring, and I'll come back to this, my engineering degrees at Rolls-Royce. And Rolls-Royce is a great company, a particularly great company to start your career at, because you receive lots of training and you grow as an engineer, both in your technical capabilities, but also get a lot of support because it's such a big global company. So I was really, really lucky at 24, mother of one, 2-year-old under my arm, to start at Rolls. And I was armed with humor from the military training, armed with my ring. I'll talk about my ring for 2 minutes. You know what this is. I don't know if everybody knows what this is, but engineers who graduate from Canadian universities receive or are let into the engineering profession and given the iron ring. And the iron ring is a symbol of your duty to your profession. It's a symbol of unity. It's a symbol of teammanship and pulling together. It's also your little reminder every day of your working life. You put this on your working finger, that it's a faceted ring. And so the thinking was, and this is 100 years ago, 100 years next year, actually, because this is early, when we've almost been receiving these rings for a century now. When you drag your finger to sign your paper, to sign your drawings, you hear the noise and it reminds you of your duty. Have you checked everything? Have you done your calculations properly? Is all the goodness that you studied for embedded in your work? And that's why it's a good symbol to have. And this is my original ring. It's given to you by an engineer. In this case, it was my sister. She gave me my ring. I gave my husband his ring. And my brother-in-law gave my son his ring. So we're keeping it in the family. However, I look back and I think I've been really fortunate because I've had the chance to do any number of things. And most of my career, I've never done the same role twice, not let alone the same piece of work twice. So as aerospace as an environment, engineering as a career, it's great for women. There's plenty of diversity of subject to go at, plenty of sustainability avenues where we can bring our own. And I've been lucky to have the career I've had. More importantly, my husband and I look sometimes at each other and go, how did we manage two quite senior careers and raise families as we went along? Our children are presently on 2 different continents, so that helped. But we can congratulate ourselves really because we've managed to do it without a nanny, which has been even that much more benefit. And both of us at times in our career have taken time off because we appreciate the fact that it's pretty full on when we're working. And when we come to a natural end of a role, we're not in a hurry to start something else. We'll take a block of time and just catch up with life in general, help the other, achieve balance, spend time with our children. And it's not time that we regret, although I'm often asked when going to an interview, can you explain the gap in your CV when you had this whole time that's unaccounted for in your CV? I say, well, I was catching up on life in general, spending time with my children. I don't think I need to explain more than that. And everybody goes, oh, so I get that. Fine. It's okay. And so I've not hesitated. I've managed to take 2 maternity leaves as chief engineer. Whilst at Rolls-Royce, I was already in sort of my mid-career. And that was great. It gave me a chance to work on succession planning. You have to hand over the reins. And in Canada, it's not like the States, back to what Reshma was saying, quite progressive in terms of parental leave. You can share the parental leave, but you are guaranteed, if you come back within a year, your role. So the company has to work with you to give you some way of being able to hand over the reins for a while and take them back when you come back. And that's hugely powerful because it means that as an individual, you haven't taken a step back in your career. You come back to the point where you were when you left. And yes, there's benefits in having developed somebody else in that role. And we use that quite effectively at succession planning. So not all hunky-dory. I was trying to think of, and I promised I was going to cover some of the topics that leave us slightly a bit uncomfortable under the collar sometimes, which is when you're underrepresented in a more male-dominated environment, it comes with a set of problems, not necessarily significant problems, and hopefully you're able to deal with all those problems when they've arrived. It's not what I prefer to reflect on. It's useful to reflect on them, if only just to come up with lessons. But although I've had this great progression and I've been well supported every step of the way, I've never lacked for anything. I was given lots of training and taken care of. I was also interrupted while speaking in meetings, more than my share. There is a term for that. It's called manterruption, and it's a real thing. Men interrupt women when they're speaking 3 times more than they will interrupt a man. I've had simple concepts, engineer, 2 degrees, mansplained to me. Surely I need to explain to you how this works. No, you don't. I've been mistaken for an office assistant to ask for coffee. I've been told, you have a great handwriting, can't you not take any notes? I became really good at taking notes. In fact, it's the cornerstone of success, really, if you manage to really distill into good notes what is being said around you. And it's very powerful because you can come back with those notes and refer back to them. And it stood me in good stead. I turned up at a customer's headquarters in Brazil. I was chief engineer. I talked to the individual over the phone. There was no video conferencing at those days. Over the phone, over email, we developed a great relationship. He invited me to come to talk to their conference. I got off the plane and walked into the office, and he went, "You're not who I thought you were." And back to gender bias, he had not imagined that I would turn up and I would be a 30-something chief engineer. He thought I was a middle-aged Indian man. And I went, "What? What do you mean a middle-aged Indian man?" He said, "Well, your name is Gange." Well, that doesn't know it's Gagne, and it doesn't mean that I'm an Indian. That's not my background. And he was totally confused, but then kind of got over his shock, and off we went, and had continued to have a great relationship, albeit slightly redefined. I witnessed and was, received weathered many microaggressions, and that was before even the term existed. You learn to deal with them. Humor was always my big weapon, as I call it. And I learned to deal with bullies. Bullies exist, but they're not necessarily bullies that are after a gender bullying. Bullies like to bully everyone. And you have to learn to deal with them when you're in the workplace. And that's equal for women as it is for others. And bullies can bully other men. Two women can bully each other. Different minorities bully each other, and older people and younger people also can have that tension in their relationship, and you need to learn to manage those circumstances in a work environment. So I learned to manage those circumstances. What are we doing for time? So I was listening to you. Sorry, I just don't want to take up anybody else's time. It's easy to get carried away. It's easy to get carried away. So my experience hasn't been any different than any of my other female colleagues. I think the one thing that I have learned to do is really observe in my environment. So I'm not one to jump up and talk too much. I try and observe and listen. Back to the good training I received at Rolls-Royce, we take the ODA course, Observe, Deduce, Analyze. It's about mechanical failures and about not jumping to conclusions when you look at a failed part. You have to understand why it's failed, and you have to look at all the evidence that's presented to you. It's the same in relationships. If you're trying to deal with a difficult person in a work environment, observe how they are, and don't jump to assumptions as to why they're doing what they're doing. Try to get to the root cause of it, and observe their behavior for a while before you jump to taking action, because sometimes the result, and I'll give this one example because it's really telling. I'm fessing up to some of my unconscious biases here. There was a very tall person in our office, and I got tired of hearing the ladies of the office complain that he was looking down their top. And a bit of humor to finish off. And I thought, gosh, that's terrible. And then I thought, come to think of it, he looks down my top a lot too. And I can't be having that in the office. And I was a manager. I had to, take action somehow. But I took time to look at what he was doing. And actually, because he was very tall, he was leaning into everyone. He was bending over and talking to people close to them. And if you're a lady and you're a bit short, it did really look like he was looking down your top. I can understand the sentiment left everybody uncomfortable, but actually he was doing that to the men wearing shirt and ties. He was not looking down their top. So I had a conversation with him. I said, I'm a bit short and small, and when you hover over me like this, I find it intimidating. It would be really much better for conversation if you could stand a step back and talk to people looking them in the eyes, because then you feel like you're more engaged in the conversation and you're not as intimidated. And he started doing that with men and women, and the problem went away. But it was something really easy to fix, and it was something that was just really giving him a bad reputation. We jumped to conclusions, but nobody had taken the time to really observe the individual. I'm just saying, unconscious bias can be felt and lived by everyone, and we just need to just spend a little bit of time talking, communicating, observing, and we can resolve a number of these problems that we see in the office, and makes things helpful for people all around. Better for him, better for everybody in the office. So I won't keep you, although I could possibly go on and on and on and on. So I'll leave the podium to others, but thank you. And we can come back to questions afterwards if you want, or as part of the panel.
I'll take one question in the room and one question online. So in the room. No questions. Oh, okay. So if you introduce yourself first, that would be helpful.
Hi, I'm Jo Moses. I'm an executive search consultant within the aerospace sector. I really enjoyed your presentation. I wondered, what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give to someone else at the beginning of their career, as someone who's just leaving university now? What would you say to them?
I'd say it takes time to embed yourself properly in an organization where you can feel like you add value. And a lot of the younger generation don't feel allegiance to a company in particular, and they tend to jump around. They will up and leave for a reason of salary or convenience or whatever. But to really get that experience and get under the skin of things, then it's helpful to stay in one place for a little bit more time than what perhaps your friends are doing, and then you'll get so much more value out of the experience. So that's perhaps what I'd say.
Good.
How do you?
And I'll take one question online which says, thanks Martine for a brilliant talk. What traditionally feminine characteristic do you have that you've used most to excel in your career?
That I've used most?
Yes.
Ooh, I think it's a combination of humor and optimism, because you can come across a number of things, and sometimes it's a bit discouraging to look and see how little progress is made, but you can use a little bit of humor and a little bit of optimism. And I suppose the biggest tool I've had, and it's not necessarily a feminine trait, but it's really trying to be authentic with yourself and say, right, what drives me here? What's my purpose? What am I going to do? And be really clear on that. One of the exercises I did in women in leadership training was define the 6 words that define you and stick to those 6 words. And we thought about it for a while and thought, it needs to be reflecting what it is that I do and what is it that I do. And my 6 words were go big, invest wisely, and have fun. And everybody else had different words. And go big is something I try and do every time. I try and elevate the conversation. Are we really trying to reach this goal, or does the goal have to be times 10 for us to reach times 5 and not times 2? Go big. It's in the mindset. It's what you want to do when you set your stall for it. Invest wisely. It's time. We're pulled in all sorts of different directions. It's not investing your money. It's investing your time. What do you really care about? You have this amount of time that's free, this amount of time at home with your family, this amount of time at work. Invest in the right things, and then have fun. If what you're doing isn't fun, you're not deriving pleasure from your career every single day, then you're not in the right thing. So, and I've used those as guidance. So I say, be authentic. Don't worry. You can wear pink, and you can wear red, and you can do whatever it is that you want. And it doesn't make you feminine, but just be authentic with yourself.
Thank you. Yes, that's really helpful. Well, thank you. Especially investing your time wisely. I love those.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I'm conscious we've got some more questions online, but we will aim, I think, after the event, to pick up those questions, perhaps with the speakers, and circulate that to our attendees. Okay, so next, I want to invite to the stage Dr. Ruth Mallows-Ray to talk about her personal journey towards diversity and change. Ruth is a consultant facilitating discussions between industry, government, and academia, and a close mentor of mine. Her current portfolio spans a range of sectors, including manufacturing, aviation, and hydrogen. Ruth has held positions including the Chief Operating Officer at the Aerospace Technology Institute, where I met her, and Director of Aerospace Aviation and Defence, the Knowledge Transfer Network, the KTN. Ruth is also the non-exec director of the National Composite Centre, offering her wide understanding of innovation, but also diverse sectorial experience. So welcome to the stage, Ruth.
Good afternoon, and Carissa, as President of the Royal Aeronautical Society, thank you for convening this panel of amazing women. I am thrilled to be sitting side by side with them today. So I like saying certain things, and I am constantly practicing this. I am a successful, fabulous woman, and I don't think we say that enough. So I just thought I would start with that. So I have zigzagged my career. I have zigzagged across oil and gas platforms, shop floors, boardrooms, and ministerial briefings. I am known across my networks, particularly in aerospace and aviation, as positive, as engaged, as driven. And over the last 15 years, possibly controversially, I have felt advantaged by being so often the only woman in the room. Admittedly, this has come at a time in my career when I was more senior. I kind of knew what I was about. But I also think I'm in innovation. I'm there about trying to make change. So actually, I was a physical manifestation of something different in the room. And I think at times that has really helped. But I meet people like Carissa so often who are working their way up the organisations, bottom to top. And I feel the struggle of being in a system of sort it, this is how it works. I meet the engineers, the scientists, the pilots, those with career vocations whose progression is marked against decades, if not centuries, of established standards and practices. I meet those who feel alone in their endeavours. So despite my confidence, I am here, it's like a box of nerves, despite what it might look like, feeling anxious about our journey together. I have some stories. I hope they leave you feeling less alone. I have some views on the lack of pace. I hope they act as insight for those of you who can affect change in an organisation. And I have some ideas and hope they align with yours to create a momentum of forward action. The why we need to reach gender balance is so often frequently wrapped up as we need all the skills we can possibly get, so we must ignore 50% of the population. Data shows that economic performance with increased gender representation at all levels improves, the performance of those businesses. Of course, it's the right thing to do. And all of this is true, but I think there is another reason why we have to address gender balance. I think achieving gender balance across workforces will dramatically reduce sexual discrimination across societies. It will improve behaviour collectively, and we will make better societies for all. In my view, gender balance manifests, or gender imbalance, as I quite often like saying, rather, because it's an imbalance, manifests itself as sexual discrimination, usually referred to as gender bias. And I am of a mind that we are broadly ignoring this. As we women, we are unwittingly judged and boxed into ways of working that have been developed over a couple of centuries. And this is not a men-bashing pitch. It absolutely is not. I do not hold with that as a strategy. But it remains a fact that working practices have evolved as a result of a dominant voice. And that voice is predominantly white, and it's predominantly male. Sexual discrimination is a spectrum of acts. And whilst this is uncomfortable, I believe it is the elephant in the room. Throughout my career, I have experienced the effects of these systems in various guises, and I think I've deployed 4 strategies. I've ignored it, or laughed at it actually sometimes, mostly through my teens and 20s. I have walked away, also known as avoid. I fix as I go, where I can, and I have sought out support. There have been some interesting moments. I ignored the teacher at 14 who told me and 4 of the girls that we'd been put in second set of chemistry because there were too many girls in the top set. I ignored the same teacher, who remains nameless, is an absolute twit. I ignored the same teacher who repeatedly told students at A-level that there was no place for women in science. I was told that I was marriage fodder. I was told that the only job I might do in science was titration because it was fundamentally boring and it suited our personalities. We got on so well, you can imagine. Anyway, off I went to university and I studied chemistry for 7 years and I ignored him. My first role of academia was in the oil and gas industry. off I went. I had to go offshore. I have been dunked. I have been in that environment tank. I have jumped off 3-metre platforms. But I thought I would get some advice before I actually went offshore. And advice came in terms of tricks that get played to novice riggers, the hierarchy, some really useful stuff. And then a very kind gentleman one day pulled me aside in the office and said, Ruth, when you go offshore, don't put your underwear in the wash because it won't come back. And so I was like, okay. But what everyone categorically failed to explain to me was that in the late 90s, porn was still being shown in the common room of the oil and gas platform. And so I went about my business. I held on to my underwear, I avoided the common room, and I did my job. I ignored it, and actually I just felt sorry for it as a system more than anything. But I was in my 20s, you know, you don't know how to fight this, and you're just kind of shocked and you kind of slot in or avoid it, whatever it is. But it wasn't good. I have walked away twice, which is avoidance. You can call it whatever you like, but I've walked away twice. In one role, I was in a very sales-orientated organisation, and I was categorically told that promotion comes only to those who work in the Middle East. We won't send you to the Middle East, Ruth. It's no place for a woman. And yet there's somebody in this room, I'm sorry, Samir, you're going to get to mention, Samir will talk to you about the Middle East being his most positive experience of inclusion. And I was told categorically, we will not send you there. You will never get a promotion. So I walked. And I wouldn't get sent because of being female. And I've also worked in professional services, a much more balanced environment in terms of representation, even when I was there. But encapsulated in it is an up and out culture. It is very aggressive. You either succeed or you leave. I was directly bullied in this culture. I was blatant over intimidation. It was relentless criticism from an individual. I was yelled at in meetings. I was yelled at across an open plan floor. And people saw it. And people came to me and said, you know, Ruth, you're being bullied. And I went, yeah. And they said, well, you know, we think you should think about it. But their advice and their support came up with a really interesting caveat. And they said, we just want you to think about it because you are a female being bullied by a male, and it will turn very quickly to sexual harassment, and you will ruin his career. And so I left. I did not want to be there. I did not want to be in an organisation that recognised that I was being treated. And so there's Martine or somebody talked about being bullied, and actually bullying is bullying, right? And that's what I was experiencing. But I walked away and I walked into aerospace. And so I fix as I go. And I believe that small things can do and will make a difference. I have been and remain intolerant of being called anything other than Ruth or Dr. Mallows Ray. I will not be called love, dear, pet, sweetheart, darling, and I will tackle it head on. I will tackle it head on in a meeting. I will tackle it on one-to-one. I had to put it in writing once because it just wouldn't stop. And so when I was called out across a room, I would just ignore them until they used my name. I have a name. I do not use terms of infection the other way. Do not do it with me. So I am absolutely hard over on one of those things. And I have great fun in deploying it, actually, most of the time. I decline panels where there isn't sufficient representation. If there's 3 of us and there's only me, fair enough. If there's 4 or 5 of us and there's only me, no, I won't go. And I'll give them names. You can change them out, whatever you like. But I think that's really important. And controversially, I have an Excel spreadsheet with lots of women's names on. And when recruiters phone me, I only give them women's names.
The coincidence.
Right, so it's outrageous. I got this top tip from Ruth McKernan, former Chief Executive of Innovate UK. That's what she does too. And I now get a lot of phone calls from recruiters. But I don't care, right? So those are things that I do. And it's one of my biggest mantras of women know women. So ask me and I will give you some names. But mostly I have constantly and continually seek support. In my career, I have had 3 exceptional, and I mean exceptional male mentors throughout my journey. John Bowling in AMEC, Ian Godden in ADS, and many of you will know Ian Gray, who are now at Cranfield. These are exceptional people, not just in their own careers, but their advocacy, their commitment and their support of women and a more balanced workplace. I thank them here again today for their insights and advice, and I wouldn't be where I am without them. And I've had two exceptional female coaches, Mari Eastwood and Elizabeth Anderson. And these two women showed me my frustrations with cultures and systems. They showed me how I was butting up against something that was ultimately male institutionalisation, and wondering why my female way of working with, of course we can, let's go do it together, let's talk about it, let's break it down, wasn't getting me anywhere. It was fascinating, liberating and transformative. And I have nurtured a fabulous network. Lindsay Mallers, Lynn White, Amy Chappell, Geraldina Arata, Julia Brown, Colette Cohen, Fran McIntyre, the list goes on. I can phone any one of these exceptional women and say I'm stuck. I have their back, they have mine, and they will jump on a Teams call and tell me what to do. Very bossy group of women, I hasten to add. But I have an exceptional network. And lastly, if I am asked to talk to a teenager, a graduate, a colleague, a startup, any female on the planet, I will say yes every time. So often women just need a safe space, and who am I to deny that safe space to them? So in my world, I've ignored, walked, tried to fix and sought some support. But ultimately, it is a system that has to change. It is more than 15 years since I have sat in an organisation of scale. And so what is really going on in there, I don't really know. But I guess on the grounds we are here today, it's not where it needs to be. The World Economic Forum, as we've heard earlier, says it will take us 131 years to get to global equity. 131 years, I'm so depressed. Iceland remains number one for the 9th year running at 91%. And so, it can be done. So we should be learning. But in the UK, engineering is still at about 16%, and it only went from 10.5 to 16.5 in 11 years. So we are not moving the dial, and it is the system that must change, and this is what Carissa has brought us all together. So we can make changes, and we must. We really must not let go, but the system must change. And my analogy in aviation is this is quite a scary thought, not being an engineer, but should I design and build a hydrogen-powered aircraft and get it certified, I can't do anything with it because the system isn't ready, right? So, what's our analogy of trying to get the system ready? We're here, we've been built, but the system isn't ready. How do we help the system? And my point being, the pressure is on women to change rather than other things. So I think there are 2 or 3 things that we can do, and I think we need to look at some of the levers that we have at our disposal to affect and to drive change. We fundamentally refuse to set targets. I think it's really interesting, Martine, that you did in Canada. We set targets, look what happened, makes a difference. We refuse to fix a pipeline. We don't think it's our problem. I'll come to that in a minute. And I do actually think that gender imbalance has become gentrified in a way that I'm not particularly comfortable with. So I was never really a fan of targets, but I think they drive behaviour. And Martina's exampled that brilliantly today. Why is it that we can't say by 2030 all of our apprentices will be 50-50? Why is it that we can't say by 50-50 middle management will be 50-50? Why is it that the industry is so terrified of setting some ambition and some targets to drive recruitment, to drive change, to adopt? And I would even go as far as to say that if you're an organisation, you can affect a target, I think you become instantly more interesting and attractive to women, thinking they've set targets, they really do mean business. We're not fixing the pipeline. So 2008, I came into aerospace. People kept telling me, I tried to look women, Ruth, around 10A. We've got to fix the pipeline. And what we have to really fix is we have to fix how maths is taught in primary school. And really, what we really need, Ruth, is men to teach maths in primary school. I kid you not. And then it'll all be okay. Right? And it's this constant blaming of something. And yet, actually, I think industry can do something quite dramatic. My example is EDF. EDF in the early 2000s looked at their apprenticeship intake and they wanted more women. So they did something about it. They created a coordinated action of their employees into schools. It was coordinated. It wasn't a policy saying you can if you like. It was a coordinated action. And they coupled it with adverts. It's called the Pretty Curious campaign. It starts with a face of a little girl or a young woman, and she says, I'm pretty curious, or I'm pretty determined. And as it zooms out, she's doing science. They changed their statistics, they coordinated their action, and they made a change. They also targeted to critical age places in girls' education systems. At the age of 8 or 9, girls start to sexually mature. We go earlier than boys, and we start to change what we want to do in the playground. We want to team, we want to play, we are role modelling, we are collaborating. Totally different story another time, but I worked on after schools computer clubs for girls. All that came into my out of my peripheral vision into line of sight. They targeted that, and then they targeted the 14-year-olds who were making choices. And they didn't say choose STEM, they just said go for balance. Don't lock yourself out of science. You might not want to do it, but don't lock yourself out. Yeah. And then gentrification. So this is harder, but I do feel this is what is happening. Only those in organisations can really say, and I just don't know, but the topic seems to be, we've signed the Women in Aerospace and Aviation Charter. We've done really well. We have a policy on inclusion. We've done really well. But that accountability, that crispness, that drive, that difference-making action just doesn't seem like it's there. And indeed, if you search gender balance on Google, research is looking and feeling dated. You know, the research just feels out of kilter. So I don't feel we're having a discussion on strategies and actions that will move the dial. And whilst I accept there are many, many allies, male allies in our sphere, all successful fights have won. We need more. We need more than an ally, and we need a call to action. And there are many today, and it has been touched on, who are parents. I'm not a parent. I am a slightly obsessed, adoring aunt, and those who know me well know this about me. Millie's doing fine by a bit of good. She's amazing. So, but I am an obsessed auntie, but I'm not qualified to talk about it, but I hear it a lot. I hear it a lot about the imbalance in caregiving, the impact of the pandemic, the cost of childcare. And I think there might be a moment with the Labour administration if they come in. They're doing 10-year strategies. Angela Rayner's backstory is fascinating. She's the deputy Labour leader, and her understanding of Sure Start and Early Start in primary and what needs for a parent to help their kid get ready is really interesting. But ultimately, we need, whether it's means tested, but it has to be affordable childcare that allows, I liked your phrase, I can't remember it in my team, but this ability, equity of coming in and out of the workforce to respond to growing your family. So I'm going to do that. I'm fine. I'm going to do that. Oh yeah, okay. Quick faster. Anyway, advocate. Number one, advocate. Right, we are our biggest champions. On International Women's Day, get onto LinkedIn and name check 8 women. It's my favourite thing. Last year, I really pulled a blinder. I did 8 women every 8th day for 8 weeks. I named 64 women. I don't know if I'm going to do it again. I was quite tired. And I was like, oh God, I've got to do it again. And then, though I did discover that I could do delayed posts on LinkedIn, that was quite handy. But, you know, that is a start. If everybody in this room name checks 8 women, that gets us somewhere. Start your own list. Start your list of women. Get your own list. Get your own Excel spreadsheet. Be the person that when they phone, I put Clarissa's name on job or things, put Martine's name on jobs. You don't know this, but I've named women and said, go talk to them. It might not be for them, but go and have that conversation. So start your own list and name the women, ask the women, and, you know, go for that. I think there's something about in the system level. I think most organisations do have diversity networks and inclusion networks and EDI networks. I wonder if they need a bit of a reset. something, can you go reset them? So McKinsey did a study, and 86% of respondents who participate say it was beneficial, and 76% felt that they had stated that policies had changed because of that activity. But do those need a reset? Is there something that just needs reinvigorating about how those things are working in organisations? And ultimately, I think it's really important to be your best self. I mean, really be your best self. There is absolute recognition now that women, that we lead differently, that we have a slightly different tone, a slightly different way, and courses are now widely available bespokely on women leadership. Go on them. Get on them. Look for that female coach. I cannot understate the impact of being coached by a senior executive female. It was just incredible. Oxford, Ashridge, and there's a really great consulting firm, and I know them really well, so it is a massive plug, but WDI Consulting do vast amounts on women leadership and coaching, and they are a dream. They are in financial services, do all sorts. They're involved in the aviation charter as well. But, there are resources, and do some self-development. Read the book that I buy, lots of women, sales, I'm supporting entire sales of one book, is Be a Woman in Your Own Right. It is a small A5 book. It differentiates aggression, assertive behaviour and passive, and it lays it out beautifully. I had a 3-year debate about being aggressive. I said I wasn't. I was assertive. It took us 3 years to come to an agreement that I was right and they were wrong, but, we got there eventually. So, but self-development, do read. I think reading, these books, these stories, Caitlin Moran, A Woman's Place in the Boardroom, all those, it does give you armour, really, in what you're doing. So I'd like to say thank you again, Carissa, for inviting me to speak today. I wish every single one of you well in your journeys, and I thank you for your time today.
We've got time for a minute. There's so many things I wanted to respond to, and being one of those persons who picked up the phone. I remember when I called you and said, "I'm done. Get me out of here." I remember it well, and you just had a battle plan ready to go and reactivated it.
Yeah.
So that having that network and that list and people you can call on.
Yeah.
And
I think it's really important.
Always pick up the phone, even on the train you were messaging me.
I just think, just being able to, half the time when you talk to me, you actually knew what you needed to do. You just needed to say it out loud. Didn't have to say it out loud somewhere else. Most of us know what we need to do if we are in strife or struggle. You just need to say it out loud to somebody who is not in it, but will get it. Who are close enough to understand the construct of it, but not quite in it.
Thank you. So we've got time. I'll take questions in the room. Yes. So we've got the microphone. If you introduce yourself and.
Hi, Liz.
Oh.
Is it on? Oh, yeah. Liz Moscott with Gear Up TV, Jet Zero TV. I was riveted, and thank you both. Thank you for organising the event today. Since I started my career, I've been at events and advocating for women. I can't wait for the day when we're just gathering to gather together and not have to have some of these discussions. And I wonder about, it's amazing. We do need to bring more women into STEM subjects and STEM careers. I think, too, we need to celebrate the careers that women do overrepresent, if you like, because I've been told many a time I'm part of the soft skills, and the languaging around soft skills or roles that don't necessarily carry as much clout tend to be all around vastly overrepresented by women. Would you speak a little bit to that, please, and some of the languaging we have around that? Because I think more women in senior roles paid equally is the goal, really, as much as where we're represented.
So we laugh about the conversation I had with Stephen, a guy I worked with at AMEC a long time ago, about my aggression versus assertion. But it did actually come down to, a lot of it was, I was in a fairly senior role, I was in a transformative role, and I wasn't in a what he stereotypically knew women in roles. And so actually I could see why he couldn't understand why I was being so stroppy. I wasn't in those soft skills of personnel or whatever you want to call it. I think what's really interesting about that, and I'm kind of going to go back to STEM, because I kind of want that's where my heart is I still think that we promote through hard skills. I still think we promote through, here's Carissa, electrical engineer, aerospace, sorry, but engineer, and she's done this technically brilliant and this technically brilliant and this technically brilliant. And so people are promoted through hard skills. Yet in actual fact, when you get to the top, what you need are the soft skills. You need the empathy, the compassion, the ability to listen, the ability to ask the right open question. And quite often what you see at the top of the tree in STEM organisations is the lack of soft skills. And I know this, the evidence for some of this from the work that I don't, not my work, but WDI Consulting I've mentioned, they've done a lot of this in the financial services, which is a different kind of male dominated environment, very aggressive, law practices. And they've seen work in law practices changing because they're starting to recruit through a combination of soft and hard skills, so that actually that is recognised coming, up the way. I don't know if that helps or not, but
It's the language. I think technical skills and empathetic skills, or, that kind of language, because when we say hard and soft, there's an implication, I interpret, that one is somehow more powerful than the other. And it's having the parity in a lot of the way we describe who we are and what we do. Yeah, we're all brilliant. I think being here is brilliant, girls, ladies, us, but thank you. Anyway, thank you. That was very interesting.
So I think the other insight I have as well is that when I was being interviewed for the first job that I had coming into aerospace as director of the Aerospace and Defence KTM, it was a 3-stage interview process. I was interviewed by 4 blokes, then another 2 different blokes. Fabulous experience. And don't feel intimidated, Ruth. It's just, it's friendly chat. Okay, totally all over it. But anyway, they were, this was a national knowledge transfer program. This was about networking. It was about community. It was about knowledge transfer. But I had no aerospace and defence expertise, right? So I'd been on aircraft on my holiday, and I used to go to RAeS Finningley as a kid, and that was about it, right? So they were right to ask, how can someone with no aerospace and defence expertise come into the sector and lead a knowledge transfer network? And at the time I was being coached by Elizabeth, and your desire is to go, well, it's not about that. It's not really about that. I've done this and I've done this and done this. And she helped me completely turn this question around so that I wasn't offensive and I was positive. And I said, I think it's a really valid point. And you guys need to think about it. I think it's a really valid point. But I think really this is a conversation about knowledge and community building and networking and teams and understanding the challenges that face in the sector on innovation. Why does it take, somebody had already told me it takes 15 years. It still takes 15 years to get an idea over the line, apparently. I don't understand why that is either. But, why does it take 15 years? How could you do it differently? I said, it isn't, you don't need another expert in aerospace and defence. It's full of them. You need someone who's expert in something else. And so I thought that was quite interesting to not go in with this defensive, it doesn't matter. And I've been asked some awful questions. How will you, as a woman, deal in the oil and male industry? I have no idea, but I did run around an oil and gas platform, keeping hold of my underwear at all times. But, those questions, God, they make my blood boil. And as a woman, you can't sit in an interview and get emotional and let your blood boil, because you're dismissed of, oh, there they go again. But, I've been asked those questions. Makes my blood boil. You're very cross.
Thank you, Watson. Well, we've got other questions, but what I'll do is share the questions with the speakers, because I don't want to keep you from your networking break, your coffee break now. So we'll share the questions online that's coming in, and we can respond to them after the event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. Okay, so conscious we started a bit late, but we'll have a networking break now. So teas and coffees, and we'll be back at, let's do 15 minutes. Welcome back. So the next session we're going to move into is duty of care. And I want to invite Lucy Prince, Chief People Officer of Volocopter, to the stage. Lucy is a linguist and interpreter by training, and she spent the first 10 years of her career in a wide variety of roles, overseeing partners and projects at the Royal Bank of Scotland, across Europe and Asia. She is a communicator at heart and brings this passion to life in her role as Chief People Officer. When she is not building up the global team that will bring advanced air mobility or urban air mobility to life, she spends time with her young family. Lucy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Carissa, for your warm welcome. It's a real pleasure to be here today. And I have to also say, it's just a breath of fresh air. I spend most of my working day with men. 23% of my company is female, which is pretty good for aeronautical industries. But it is just an absolute breath of fresh air to be here today and feel this supportive and collaborative atmosphere amongst one another. I'm going to explain a little bit about myself and about the company that I work for before I go into the topic today of duty of care. I'm originally from Belfast, and I've been living in Germany now for over 11 years. I'm very proud of my home city, and I love to tell people that indeed is where I'm from. But when I was growing up there and when I was a teenager in the 90s in Belfast, it wasn't really the most open-minded place to be. And my reaction to that from a young age was very much, I want to see the world. I didn't want to go backpacking. I didn't want to spend 2 weeks summer. I wanted to live in other countries amongst other cultures. And that's one of the reasons that I chose to study languages, because I wanted to be able to speak to as many people as I could in their mother tongue and really to kind of get a feeling for them as people, for their cultures. And that's, like I said, what took me to study languages. And to then also achieve some of those personal goals, I spent a year studying in France, a year studying in Spain, and I really got to have an understanding of those countries and other people there. I joined the Royal Bank of Scotland out of university. Why did I do that after studying languages? Well, I chose to go back to Ireland, and again in Northern Ireland, kind of 2004, 5, 6, there wasn't really that many options if you hadn't studied a profession. So I chose to go into banking, international company again. I wanted to have this way to see the world. Somebody said earlier that financial services is a different beast when it comes to males and male dominance in the workplace. I don't want to go into too many details, but I think, Carissa, I've experienced the boss at the hotel room who seems to think that you come as part of the job as well in the early days of my career. And where do you go with that? How do you handle that whenever you're 26 years of age? Just no clue. And it's, again, as you said, you're the problem, not the boss. Yeah, it's not the case. We need to break those stereotypes. With RAeS, I finally made it out to Singapore. Again, achieving these personal ambitions that I had to see the world, which is where I met my German ex-husband and what eventually brought me to Germany. Fast forward a few years, I've had 3 kids, and I'm looking to return to work after spending some time with my kids. Again, I was really looking to be in a diverse atmosphere, and we'd moved to a really small village called Forst, which has got 8,000 people in it, beside a somewhat bigger village called Bruxelles, which has got 45,000 people in it. And I was like, what am I going to do here that is going to kind of give me this need that I have for diversity? I had a couple of barriers in my way. One was language. I can speak German. I never learnt it though. And I'd never worked for a German company and worked in German language. And whilst in the UK and some of the Anglo environments, having a gap in the CV is something that you can explain. In German kind of workplace, they're very much like the CV to make absolute sense, no gaps, and they can explain one step after the other why you took that step. Already that I'd gone from languages into banking was something that people kind of couldn't get their heads around. Anyway, long story short, what do you do when you don't know what to do? I turned to Google and I put into Google English speaking jobs Bruxelles, and I found Volocopter. I'd never been part of aviation. I did not know that electric air taxis were a thing. But most of all, I was amazed that this forward-thinking, innovative company was in Bruxelles. It was literally around the corner from where I was living. So, I applied, and fast forward a few months, I managed to get a job there. For those of you who don't know Volocopter, We build electric air taxis. There are a lot of companies around the world doing this at the minute. We want to fly in Paris this summer during the Olympics. Fingers crossed, touch wood, knocking anything that is holy. Let's hope that it works. There's a lot to do before we get there. I'm not trying to plug my company. What I want to say is I work at the forefront of an innovative industry. I'm Chief People Officer at that company. I see it as my responsibility to pass that privilege on. I need to make sure that the workplace that we have at Volocopter reflects the industry that it is that we are working on. But why do we have a duty of care towards women? Why is it that women, deserve this extra attention? Why do they deserve extra help in the workplace? I think let's go back to the basics. And for me, we can't fix the bigger problem if we don't get the basics right. So gender pay gap, it is alive and kicking. A PwC UK report, Women in Work, says, and this is actually quite scary, an 18-year-old woman entering the workforce today will not see pay equality in her lifetime. At the rate the gender pay gap is closing, it will take more than 50 years to reach gender pay parity. The person who wrote this report, RAeS, goes on to say, and I'm going to read this out, we must design and develop policy solutions that actively address the underlying causes of the inequality that exist today. We can look further at the global gender gap, which I think has been referred to earlier. There's 4 sub-indexes of that. Economic, which looks at the salaries that women achieve and also the levels of seniority that they get to. Educational, so access to education, including third level education, really important. Healthcare, which is obviously with maternal topics, a really big topic for women, as well as politics. So how well are women represented in politics? The global gender gap score in 2023, so what do we need to do to close the gap? Was it 68.4%. UK is doing pretty well, place 15 with a score of 79.2, and Germany is on 6th position. But it's quite interesting because if you look at the sub-indexes, the UK outstrips Germany for economic participation and opportunity. So women in the UK are achieving greater levels of gender equal pay and greater levels of seniority. So 73.1% versus 66.5%. So we've got a long way to go to fulfil this duty of care towards women before we even get into the workplace. Progress is historically slow, and reaching equality requires tackling underlying harmful gender norms, many of which we've heard about today. Still today, in many societies, the place of the woman is mother and caregiver. The role of the man is breadwinner. Even when this is changing and when women do work, women still tend to bear the brunt of domestic care. In 2020, women were spending an average of 8 hours extra on childcare, just childcare, not talking about housework, than men a week. And the unfair share of childcare perpetuates what we call the motherhood penalty. So this is when women experience a loss in lifetime earnings or by raising children or brought about by underemployment. So maybe a woman wants to go back to work but can only find part-time childcare. So they take a part-time role that they're totally overqualified for, but they do it because they want to work. And we also experience slower career progression. Again, here, double standards. A man has a kid, a man has a baby, a man becomes a father. Oh, he's a responsible person. He's got to provide for his family. A woman has kids and wants to go back to work. Is she really going to be a reliable employee? Am I going to be able to speak to her at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, or is she going to be taking her kid to gymnastics? Double standards. And the motherhood penalty is now the most insignificant driver of the gender pay graph that we can see. And I think it's really, really interesting and actually quite sad that in 2022, in a certain study that I looked at, 34% of mothers stated that they believed their professional development in terms of seniority would have been better if they didn't have kids. That's really sad. For men, that percentage was 20%. Yeah? So there is a massive difference there. Highest childcare costs some of the highest childcare costs in the OECD are here in the UK. For sending two kids to nursery, it costs about 30% of the average wages. I say average. I know in certain areas it's way more than that. I've had conversations with my sister who has 1 child versus my 3. She's living in England. And, Germany, the costs are really negligible compared to what they are in the UK. She pays more for 1 than I would have paid for 3 at the same time. So again, that is something that is really affecting women here in the UK. Women cannot afford to work. Yeah? How is that the case in 2024? So when we look at why we have this duty of care towards women, we've got the gender pay gap and we've got the motherhood penalty. Before we even walk in the door, we've been penalised twice. This is why we have got a duty of care towards women in the workplace. So what do we do about this? What does this mean? And how do we make sure that we have got a working environment that is attractive to women, and a working environment where women feel comfortable, where they feel supported? There are differences between men and women, as we heard earlier from Ruth. We mainly work for companies that were set up by men, for men, hundreds of years ago. Society has moved on. Society has changed. We need to change the attitudes that we have to women in the workplace as well. Specifically for women, what's important? What is important is a workplace that actively promotes diversity, equity and inclusion, and also, importantly, that supports mental health. No wonder whenever women bear so much of the brunt of these extra societal requirements. Interestingly, if a company does not do this, women are likely to leave. A 2022 McKinsey study states that women leaders are 1.5 times as likely as men to leave a job because they want to work for a company that is committed to diversity, equity and inclusion. And back to this paradox of Germany and the pay levels being less in the UK, whereas we have an overall better rating. Women in Germany in leadership positions have fallen back to the rate that they were at in 2018. We've gone back 6 years. That's, again, that's really, really shocking, scary reading. But as Ruth says, and I've been taking loads of notes, so apologies if I'm jumping around a bit, but I've just been so inspired by all the information that I've had. Addressing the gender imbalance also helps solve the problem. When we've got a more gender equal working environment, it helps to reduce discrimination. It helps to reduce sexual harassment. So it's a big quid pro quo. What do you do about this? Some of the steps that we've taken, Volocopter, and I'm going to talk about my own experience here. I'm not here to plug the company, I promise. 2 years ago, we launched what we called an employee assistance program. This is basically an external provider. You call a number. Anyone in our company can call this, plus any of their adult family members living in the same house. And you get access pretty much instantaneously to counselling. I called it when my dad died. I had 6 counselling sessions. Waiting for that on healthcare takes months. Yeah, I used it. It's a real example. You can also get, really importantly, access to financial advice, and you can get access to legal advice. So this is a number that you call, and this is something that we put in place to really show you've got to put your money where your mouth is, right? We say we support mental health. How do we support mental health? We are a young, novel industry. A lot of our leaders are inexperienced. They're not necessarily qualified to deal with someone who comes up and says, I'm facing burnout, what do I do? So we try to put extra layers in there to show to people really with physical steps that we are supporting their mental health. Another topic, and we've heard about this again today, there's a lot of threads that are the same. It's one big topic that we need to bring together. Women are more likely to underestimate their achievements. So men are strong, women are aggressive. Men are direct, women are bitchy. Yeah, you just can't win. So what can we do about that? We need to be bold. And as we said earlier, sometimes it's really good to have stated commitments so that women know that we are taking these things seriously. We launched a mentoring program last year. As I said, we have 23% of women in the company. But we said very clearly that we wanted to offer 50% of the mentee places to women because we want to show really actively to the women in our company that we're trying to develop them, we're trying to support them, we're trying to make sure that they have got the tools that they need to succeed. And that does not mean the tools that they need to succeed by making them adopt male attitudes, but it means the tools that they need to succeed as a woman in the workplace. As Carissa said, going back, women are not the problem. The companies are the problem. We need to fix the workplace. We do not need to fix the woman. And I think that was a really inspiring thing that you started off today with. So thank you very much for bringing that impulse into us today. So whilst gender equality needs to become the norm, not the exception. So how do we achieve that? And also, what do we do when we deal with the side of this when it goes wrong? Nobody wants bullying in a workplace. Nobody wants harassment in a workplace. Nobody strives to achieve that. But the very sad fact is that it still exists. So what can we do about it? First of all, again, basics. Every company, every organisation, every charity, we need to have a clear stance on where we stand with diversity and inclusion. And ideally, we have a statement to support this. It sounds like a really, really basic thing, but it's not. Provide people with the tools that they need to make this a reality. When we onboard new team members, we need to make sure, obviously, that we're talking about this, and we need to make sure that people know what levels of recourse that they have open to them should the worst occur. We need to have mechanisms in place that allow, first of all, for hopefully any bullying and harassment to be prevented, but if it's there, to be identified, and then for it to be reported and dealt on. For me, this starts at the recruitment stage, okay? So whenever you have your first touch point with a company, that company should be clear on its stance with diversity, equity and inclusion, and it should be crystal clear that they have a zero tolerance approach to bullying and harassment. Set your boundaries, set the company that you want to be. You do not want to have bullies in-house. Make sure that they are not welcome. Make them the minority. Make them the people who are unwelcome in the workforce. When we get people on board, especially young women, we need to make sure that they are aware that there are policies and tools available to them should the worst happen. And my personal recommendation of this is go out of house, go third party, and make sure that there is an anonymous, hard to say, reporting function as well. Research shows that this can increase reporting by up to 30%, but crucially, people report earlier and problems can be solved when there's still problems, potentially, rather than a full-out case of sexual harassment. When we have identified a system that we want to use, it needs to have certain characteristics. It needs to be convenient. People need to know where it is. It should not be buried in the HR policies page of your intranet. It should be on the landing page of your intranet. It should be a button. It should be there. You should click it. It should be ready to go. It should be easy to file a report, and it should be easy to submit that report. It should be fast. It shouldn't be, 30 minutes of typing. It should be easy to start that process. It needs to be transparent. I've submitted a report. Where is it? What's happening with it? Has it been seen? Has it been received? Has it been, acknowledged? What's happening with it? What stage is it at? It also needs to be flexible. And I think this point is really, really important. We're all individuals. Our response to topics like this are also individual. Let the person making the report, making the claim, also suggest what they want the remedy for that to be. Is it simply that they think this person doesn't actually understand what they're doing? Do they need some training? Do they need some mentoring themselves? Is it that they just want the situation to stop and they want somebody else to take care of that for them so that they don't have to deal with it anymore? Or is it so bad that they're asking for the dismissal of the person in question? Make sure that the voice is heard of the person who's making this report. Ideally, again, it's a responsive system. So I've filed the report and I want to ask questions about what's going on. Ideally, it gives us the system functionality that we can still go on and ask these questions and get responses anonymously. We're not then speaking to Susan or speaking to Joe. We're speaking on an anonymous basis. It needs to be independent. Obviously, this needs to happen without fear of retaliation or repercussions. But also for the person who's being accused, it needs to be a neutral process as well. And we cannot forget that either. And I think really importantly, it needs to be actionable. And this can be difficult. So if you don't want to compromise the anonymity of a person, what do you do? Where do you actually go with that? And again, if you have this third-party external reporting tool and it's done on an anonymous basis, you can aggregate information. You can aggregate results. Is there a specific area, within a company where there is a spike in claims, a spike in reports? Maybe we need to look into that area and do some coaching around what is acceptable behaviour in the workplace, for example. And that's what happens when it goes wrong, okay? But the other thing that I think we should look at and never underestimate is that a lot of people will never raise their hands. They'll just never feel comfortable doing that for a number of reasons. I would encourage everyone to take exit interviews really, really seriously. Someone's left, it's too late to do something, but why did somebody leave? Again, aggregate information. Are people leaving? Do you hear some trigger words like uncomfortable working environment? Do you hear some trigger words like aggression? Do you hear some trigger words like inappropriate? Aggregate that information, take that information, look at that information, and again, see what you can do with it. Flipping back to where I was before, sorry, just getting to that place. So I think those are some of the really practical elements that we can put in place. Gender equality isn't going to happen by itself. And I'm going to turn this a little bit more personal now. Every single one of us needs to play a role in this, all the men and all the women. And I really, hats off to the men who are here today. It's really great to see that you take this subject as seriously as the women in this room do today. We need to be role models and we need to represent. Yeah, that's a really, really important part of this. Couple of personal examples of how I do this in the workplace. I'm a really proud mum of 3. I have 2 boys and a girl. They're awesome. Doesn't really come naturally, though, for me to go into detail about my kids in front of a larger audience or in the workplace. Sure, with my little group of people that I feel closer to, happy to talk about it, but it's not something that comes naturally to me. But I do it. Why? Because I want to normalize the fact that women work. We cannot expect that a woman walks in the door or opens her laptop, clicks off the part of her brain that is, I'm a mother and I'm responsible for the, bringing up of small people, and forgets about it for the 8, 9, 10, however many hours that person is working, and only starts thinking about it again whenever that working day is over. Those days are over. We cannot have that if we really want to make sure that we have gender equality in the workplace. So when I get the phone call from my school, oh, your son's hit his head and needs to be picked up, I tell people about it. I tell way more people about it than need to know about it, because I want to make it easier for one more person to do this. And if one more person feels comfortable saying, hey, I've got to go and pick my kid up from school earlier, then I'm going to be happy for that. And I'm going to take it as a win. We also need to share experiences and show our vulnerabilities. And again, you did this at the beginning today, and you really set the stage for the rest of us coming up here. So thank you for doing that. I grew up expecting to work. I'm from Northern Ireland. That was just the norm. My mom was a physio, and her mom ran the dairy on the family farm. It probably wasn't considered work, but it was work, but I just grew up expecting to work. Germany has got wonderful policies in place that allow people to take paid time off after having children. I was able to take 1 year off, paid, not fully paid, but paid a percentage of my salary, and look after my kids. And you can have access to a further 2 years of unpaid job protection where you can return to a job at your company. So I was in this position where I've had this 1 year's paid leave. I'm like, this is amazing. Again, speaking to friends at home, 6 months if you're lucky, 9 months for the very, very special few. It's just not the norm. I've had this year of maternity leave. I was thinking, this is great. I bonded with my firstborn. This is brilliant. He's going to go to nursery. He's going to make loads of new friends. I'm going to go back to work. And I'm not even going to go 100%. I'm going to go 80%. Oh my goodness. I'm rocking this motherhood thing. Then I announced, in the society that I now live in, that I was going to go back to work, and people were like, oh, you're going to go back to work after having a child so soon? And I'm like, I've just been at home for a whole year. So, sometimes you literally can't win. Fast forward a few years, and I'd been asked to be CPO at Volocopter. Now I have 3 kids. They're in daycare. I've become CPO at Volocopter. I think the very best comment I got about this, and it was on a frozen football pitch at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning with all 3 kids in tow. It was like, oh, I heard that you're now C-level at Volocopter. I was like, So you're a part-time mum and a full-time C-level. That hurts, yeah? That's not right, okay? Again, is it comfortable for me to share that? No, but it's ridiculous that this is still the societal norm that we have today. So I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to say it so that if that happens to anybody else in this room, that is not okay. My reaction on that day was to kind of nervously laugh and make a joke about it because I had my kids with me. Like, how rude can you possibly get, right? And it wasn't the right reaction. I should have educated that person, but I didn't do it, okay? And I regret it. But stand up for yourself, okay? It's normal to work and have kids. This is okay. You shouldn't have to take that response and you shouldn't have to take that behaviour. And another thing that I'm a great believer of on a personal level is paying it on. I am standing here today because a really wonderful woman that I got to know spoke to another really wonderful woman that she got to know. He spoke to another really wonderful woman that she got to know. And they asked me to come and speak to you today about duty of care. Boys will be boys when they're young. Yeah, it's boys' behaviour. They're a club, they're a team. Girls are pitted against each other. We're bitchy. Yeah, we want to put other people down. We want to celebrate our own successes. Let's break the cycle. We're women now. We can change the cursive. Let's celebrate each other just for the sake of celebrating each other. There doesn't need to be a hidden agenda. We can do that. We can fix this. Let's make it a little bit easier for other women to grab hold of opportunities that were potentially placed just slightly outside of our reach. How great would that be that if we could do that? And that for me is why events like today are so important. Yeah. I know that for many people, this is just talk, but it's not. This is building solidarity. This is building momentum. This is hopefully motivating and inspiring people to go a step that they otherwise may not have gone. Really important point. We're talking today about duty of care in the workplace for women. It starts way earlier than that. Most kids decide around the age of 8 what it is that they want to be. We need to start the duty of care towards girls in society before that stage so that they know that every single career that they may wish to pursue is open to them. I'm going to finish on an anecdote, if I can find where it is that I want to say. And it's about my kids again. And last year I spoke at a local women in business event in the city that I now work in. And it's a city that Volocopter's based. And I tried to do a lot in the local community so that, to give back because we get a lot of support from the local town that we're in. And it was very much on topic similar to this. And I was talking to my kids about it before I did it. And they were like, but Mama, why is it a women in business event? And I was like, well, at this stage there were 9, 7 and 6. And I was like, well, because traditionally, women face some difficulties in the workplace that men don't face. And they were kind of like looking at me going like, but why, mummy? And I was like, okay, so do you know that not that long ago in loads of countries in Europe, women couldn't vote? They were like, yeah, they knew that one. So they were okay with that. And I was like, did you also know that not that long ago in a lot of countries in Europe, women couldn't, for example, own land? And they were like, why would that be the case? And, I was trying to explain it to them a little bit. And then I was like, these two are my favourite. Did you know that not that long ago in many countries in Europe, women couldn't decide by themselves if they wanted to get divorced? Yeah. Didn't say that one to my kids because it's a little bit too close to heart at the minute. So, I didn't use that one, but that's my favourite. But the other example I did use is, did you know that not that long ago in Europe, a woman couldn't sign her own employment contract? My kids were just completely flabbergasted. It was an unbelievable scenario for them. And I would leave by saying that if we really want to fulfill our duty of care towards creating gender equality in the workplace, we need to get to the point that today's norm is a completely unbelievable scenario. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy. That was really insightful. That was amazing. Thank you. So questions in the room. We've got time for questions. Yes, if you want to introduce yourself and maybe use the microphone or... Right. Lauren will bring the microphone over to you so that those online can hear as well.
Thank you. That was amazing. I loved everything you said. So maybe this is an unfair question, but you have 3 children. The biggest issue I find isn't necessarily my own employer. It's my husband's employer who just assumes, or doesn't even assume, just doesn't even think about the fact that he has children too. So he works long hours. He's now been mandated he needs to be in London at least once a week. He travels for work once a month. And it's just assumed or not even thought about that maybe his wife needs to work too. And so it always falls to me to either do the childcare or arrange it. And I just, with your duty of care and your people officer, like how do you also support the dads as well?
Yeah, so I think it's a really, really interesting point. And I actually had this conversation with someone I used to work with recently because I was in this position and I was asked a lot about, how do I cope with having 3 kids and working, and eventually the conversation turned to, and why did you decide to leave your husband? And I was kind of like, how is this appropriate in a professional setting? But anyway, and I had this conversation with a man I used to work with, and I was like, do you ever get asked about childcare whenever you're, looking for a job? And he was like, no, but I wish I did. Yeah, he wants to assume responsibility and he wants to make it possible for his wife to work as well in a meaningful way that he does, but he doesn't even get asked. So for me, it's very much, whenever, first of all, in Germany, you can't ask people if they've got kids during an interview process. So it's only whenever people proactively give you that information that you can even touch it and talk about it. But I think it's very much, again, open communication, and it's about seeing each individual as a person. And again, it is going back to this element of we are all people. I'm going to get this the wrong way around, I'm sure. We should work to live, not live to work. I got it right. And we need to make sure that we are listening to the whole story. And we can't just see the person who's there doing the 10 hours a day or the 8 hours a day or whatever it is. We need to see that there's more than that. Doesn't solve the problem, I know, but, we start with tiny steps.
Thank you. Oh, we've got lots of hands up. No questions online, so we can take from the room.
Hi, this is all about getting more girls and more women into STEM jobs and changing the culture in STEM, in a STEM background, and I totally agree with that. How do we get to a point where traditionally female jobs are just as respected, well paid, etc., as traditionally male jobs?
I think society is going to sort a lot of that out for us by itself. We're aging. Care is becoming ever more important, and there's fewer young people to do it. And I think the emphasis that people place on care will grow. And I think, again, every turn we make at the minute, you hear about skilled labour shortages. Yeah, every single turn that we make, we need to flip the education side. We need to be more proactive, exactly as you say, about getting everyone interested in all subjects and opening all opportunities up to all people if we've got any chance of meeting the skilled labour shortage. So I actually think society, ironically, is going to help solve a lot of these problems itself.
Even such leather and such and keep go.
Yep. And
Okay. Salima Brohi from Knights, thank you very much. Everything's been amazing today. The quality of the speakers is phenomenal. It's just a comment really on what was just being said. I think overall, you were talking about making it okay for women to be flexible. You talk about, I'm going to go and pick up my kids, and to allow companies to prioritize that on the agenda. I think maybe as part of what this lady here was saying about the company assuming that her husband would be working all hours and so on and so forth, that it's incumbent upon our companies and on us to even think wider than this, and to say not just how do we promote women, but how do we promote those values that we want for women, for all of us, so that it's okay for a man to go, I'm going to go off and pick up my kids, because there's no perception that they will be penalised within the company. So we're creating not just a new culture for women, but for all of us. So just wanted to throw that into the picture. And I just have one other comment on what Martine and Ruth were saying as well on the same topic. I'm greedy because I'm excited by all of you. We were talking about targets. We're talking about, I think, Ruth, you were talking about having sort of 50% of whether it was apprentices or so on. And Martine, you're talking about thinking get big. I'm a lawyer. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she was promoted to the Supreme Court, was asked, when do you think there will be enough women in the Supreme Court? It's a panel of 9. And the questioner was expecting her to say, 4, 5? And she said, 9. And they said, well, why? And she said, because there have been 9 men for years and no one batted an eyelid.
And 100%.
Thank you.
Absolutely agree.
We had another hand up, I believe. No? Thought I saw 3 hands, but no. Okay. Thank you so much, Lucy. That was really insightful, and I love what you said about normalizing having families. That was a tip that Reshma also often talks about. So even in an email or something, it's like, sorry, I can't do that time. I'm picking up my son from nursery, etc. I don't have a family yet, but I ensured that one of my president's messages in the magazine included a picture of my godson. And our editor said, well, we've never had a baby in the magazine, and we need to fit all of these other things in. And I'm like, the baby goes in. So I think taking small steps, even in our everyday lives, to show that women have families and men have families, and that's a normal thing. So thank you for your comment, and thank you, Lucy, for that. Okay. So our next session is going to be on well-being for women in the workplace, and we're going to invite Dr. Gemma Austin, who is going to join us online for this session. She is in the US. And Dr. Gemma Austin is a champion for practical change to optimize the health and well-being of women in aerospace. She is a general practitioner, a GP, with over 20 years of experience in the Royal Air Force, and now as medical director of Flight Care Global within the international commercial aviation industry. Dr. Gemma was a key part of the Service Women's Health Improvement Focus Team, co-authoring the Service Women's Health Handbook, providing much-needed education and normalization of conversations around female-specific health issues, targeted at commanders, line managers, and colleagues. She has also led the introduction and upgrade of menstrual and urinary health support in austere environments. She continues to raise awareness around the gender data gap in aerospace medicine, aiming to ensure the health, well-being and performance and provision of protection systems. So we'll invite Dr. Gemma Austin online to join us. Thank you.
Most importantly, making this so accessible so I can join you. I've not included slides, so hopefully this feels more like I'm with you and hopefully not projected in like a giant overlord. I'm going to talk through some of the research that I did with King's College Department of Aerospace Medicine and some statistics as I go along. So if you want to find the references or any of this, then please just do get in touch afterwards and we can pick up conversations. You'll soon hear that I love talking about this topic and exploring ways we can collectively use the female lens to identify problems that have not yet had their time within the spotlight and encourage others to support sustainable change. When Carissa got the huddle of speakers together to share her vision, I was in. This was about tough conversations and speaking up to the realities and challenges that remain within the aviation and aerospace environment for women. And I've got a particularly sort of unusual interest in this coming from the medical side, in that I hear some of the more challenging things that to do with just being female in our form and not just the societal expectations of it. I'm going to talk frankly and openly about some of the more intimate health challenges faced in the workplace. It may leave you feeling uncomfortable, but I hope that by the end you'll feel ready for action, whether empowered to help yourself or to help others. Brilliant. We work in such an extraordinary and exciting environment with such a diverse range of roles on offer. Some of my examples may feel extreme, but these are recent, not historic, experiences of women within operationally focused roles. My background is the Royal Air Force. I was there for 22 years, having recently retired in October. But I think these will likely spill over into other parts of the workforce and get you thinking. And I'm sorry, I've got a slight echo on my end, so you will hear me stutter as I try and catch up with myself. I want to encourage you to talk to each other, to your colleagues within your organisations, to see if you have health and well-being hazards, perhaps hidden, that are risking your effectiveness to not just operate, but to retain the talent you have and attract your future workforce. Whilst well-being is an incredibly important topic aimed at improving productivity and retention, I strongly believe you can't build personal well-being on an unstable foundation when your basic human needs have not been recognised or met, leading individual health, safety and performance at risk. Often the focus isn't on individual engagement to raise resilience, and in some organisations this can almost be seen as getting your employees to do the work to get strong and tough and cope better with some of the fundamental issues that are created by the organisation and just keep quizzing it out, rather than supporting them to actually thrive in a healthy work environment. But women carry enough burdens, as we've heard, and that's why I want to steer away from individuals and wellbeing programmes for exactly this. I want to look at some of the root causes within our unique environments that are not about individual strengths and weaknesses, but how organisations should take responsibility and own the creation of environments that deliver foundations for positive physical and mental health and well-being of all their employees, both men and women, well beyond what sits within the statutory requirements. The Corn Ferry report, which I'm sure was shaped by many of you joining us today, highlighted that women, whilst having pride in their roles in aviation and aerospace, still did not feel welcome. Having a sense of belonging and valued identity is important in thriving in a workplace. My favourite wellbeing model requires you to think of a vessel, any shape you want, and you shape it within your mind. Its internal capacity is set by your own personality and temperament, and this is your coping reserve. Negative and positive experiences, including whether you love your job, flow into it, and depending on the current capacity of your coping reserve, will flow out as outcomes, either increased resilience or burnout. But listen to the Corn Ferry report. There's great job satisfaction in the industry, so why does burnout occur? We can only stay in the honeymoon phase for so long. feeling things are going to be different, that change is about to happen, etc., before stress becomes chronic stress and burnout sets in as you become physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted with always trying to drive the change with nothing actually happen. So for me, there's really no point in talking about mindfulness and yoga when you can't have a pee during your working day, as you'll soon find out. And this is one of my hot topics today. So let me take you on the journey of my research and back into how I became heavily involved in researching the gender data gap within aerospace medicine research and getting the nickname Queen P. As I said at the start, Carissa wanted us to talk tough, and this is going to take you on a woman's normal physiological journey, but within the context of aviation and aerospace. This is no ordinary workplace, and we have to stop apologizing for what's normal for us. We have to stop feeling that we're the problems, the difficult ones, for being designed differently to men. This talk is likely to arouse something deep within. Rarely I don't hear conversations about a peeing horror story, especially if you've experienced the luxury of military aviation transport. But with a smile, this is sort of almost a bonding experience for women who've just had to sort of put up with the sort of the way our system's designed, because it, as we've said lots before, was designed on the foundations of a male organisation. But you're now in a brave space with everyone alive to the deeply odd, and this is a phrase I'll come back to later in the talk, things that women have had to regularly put up with within their careers. And I don't know how freely the tea or champagne has been flowing yet, but please, if you didn't take a comfort break, do go now, as you'll be thinking a lot about peeing during this talk. A couple of years ago, I was part of the shift, as Carissa kindly mentioned, and we put together a team that was stood up for 6 months to address some of the women's health needs identified in the House of Commons Defence Committee report on the lived experience of servicewomen. We needed to raise awareness and gain some allies quickly in the 6 months that we were there for. And so we wrote a series of blogs for Defence on to pee or not to pee, mud and blood, the booby trap, and it's getting hot in here, which I think you can probably guess what the core topics were. They were humorous clickbait titles, but the content each highlighted how cultural and organisational norms that have grown from male-focused and dominated organisations had led to women suppressing their norms, their own sort of experience, sugarcoating their experiences, and most worryingly, experiencing shame and embarrassment on a near daily basis just because of who they are. The impact we made was a career high, and I think I could almost describe myself as a defence influencer with upwards of 10,000 reads on some of the context. My context is the UK military, as you're aware, but I know many of you will connect with this from your parts of the aviation and aerospace medicine industry. So my start was with a CAS Research Fellowship, which I applied for in 2020 and then delivered during COVID. It gave me a year of study to look at the gender data gap, proposing the research question about whether there was a gender data gap in aerospace medicine research that may be impacting recruitment and retention within the RAF line branches, based on the fact that our sort of group had grown in a similar way. We were very sort of white male dominated in the 60s, and now we have so many more women within aerospace medicine and defence medicine. Were we using our lenses to try and change the research focus so that we understand more about everyone who might fly? The gender data gap, for those that you may not be aware, is a phrase that refers to the missing female data or male data being applied to women, assuming that there's no difference in our experiences and physiological, physical and psychological outcomes. Or perhaps not sex, I always get this one, not sex disaggregating data that's gathered. And then also absence of female-centric and female-specific topics within research like menopause and menstruation. When given the award, my congratulations from a senior acted as an accelerant. Congratulations. I don't think you'll find anything though. We've got some female Typhoon pilots now. I quickly realised I was pushing a concept that we might not yet be ready to acknowledge and understand as an organisation in the same way it had been embraced by converts to the sort of Caroline Criado-Perez Invisible Women group, where the way of seeing challenges for women existing in a world designed for men was well known. So I needed to think about how I could put this within the right context for people to understand what I was trying to get across. I'm a GP at my core, and in my consulting room, I'm in a privileged position. I have conversations with our workforce that often wouldn't happen in a typical crew room or by the water cooler. And this has always stuck with me as I met women from across defence sharing their personal experiences. Although some of their issues felt like whispers in the choir to them, I had the power to sort of bring some of these experiences together and try and turn it into a research model that might just highlight some of the issues being faced without personally identifying women across defence. These women are tough. They share characteristics. They're determined. They didn't want to make a fuss. They would get stuck in if things were available, and they loved their jobs, and they took great value from doing them and breaking through these barriers. But they didn't want to speak up or out as they didn't feel anything would change as they were in such a minority. We've got rules and guidance in aerospace medicine dictating so much for aircrew, but very little within the women's health needs. And where we did like things like urinary tract infections, a condition that's incredibly common for women, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, the grounding period appeared very male orientated, where UTIs were a lot more unusual and a cause for sort of medical concern. The problem is we didn't have relevant research to guide this, and everything that we try and do should be evidence-based. A lot has changed in the last couple of years, sort of led in parts by our then command flight medical officer, but it got me thinking about the model that I was going to deliver. So I set myself the challenge of using urination in aviation through something that both men and women do, but to use the prism of highlighting the very different experiences that may be faced when peeing in an aircraft, when you've got some sex-specific nuances, and try and describe this issue. It was a great project to design and execute, and pilots, as we all know, like to talk about themselves, and whilst peeing turns out is no different. So do you think there was any difference between male and female aircrew and their experience of urinating within our military airborne environment? I know, unfortunately, we're not going to be engaged directly with this. But the data that I collected showed that military aircrew, so both men and women, voluntarily dehydrated and voluntarily withheld their urination to overcome the challenges of peeing. The really interesting stuff came when the data was sex disaggregated. So checking me up again with my words. Female aircrew dehydrated themselves to a 4-time greater extent. This risks their health, increasing the risk of urinary tract infections and urinary retention and incontinence issues. Their performance, limiting things like their acceleration tolerance and risk of hypoxia, and safety, increasing their risk of mistakes. That dehydration at some levels is the equivalent to turning up to work at the drink driving limit, which is not tolerated within our aviation. 2/3 of women held their urine some to most of the time versus 1/3 of men, and the majority of women felt there was no facility or device available to support them outside of our aircraft that mimicked commercial jets. So we're looking at sort of our rotary fleets and more of the fast jets. I think this is a really important point when you consider the range of facilities we provide, from toilets literally fit for the king to a plastic pee bag that is used in their fetal position. Logistically less challenging for those in the appendage. We have not successfully provided an equal number of options for female aircrew. And women, on the whole, are not risk takers. So they really would only be taking these decisions, these active decisions to dehydrate or withhold urine to risk their performance without good reasons. And these came out within some of the free text within the research. However, the statistic that I found really sobering was that 75% of women had experienced some form of shame or embarrassment urinating whilst airborne, compared with just 14% of men. So it's a very different lived experience. And we have to remember that this is their primary workplace. This is where they go every day, pretty much every day, to work. The examples continue to appear in the free text and direct contacts from women and pleasingly male leaders. The conversation was now no longer taboo, and the feeling was that they had assumed there was no problem as they'd heard nothing about this. But for many reasons, it just wasn't something that collectively come together to demonstrate the issues that were there. For our women, anecdotes laced with both humour and pain demonstrated the vulnerability of things like peeing in the back of a Hercules. If any of you have been in this luxurious environment, for women, it pretty much is a bucket strapped to the side of the aircraft with a shower curtain around it. And these women are professionals who they're airload masters, pilots within this environment. And they were having to squat over this bucket behind the shower curtain, sort of facing out towards their customers. There was also tales of sort of the impact on significant loss of situational awareness while focusing on the task of undressing in a fixed seat, whilst trying to get one-piece coverall into a position where you could then use a device. There's tales of, related to this, that the anxiety with having light-coloured flying suits or seating on sort of fluffy cream seats that may be induced if there were sort of unexpected menstrual bleeds. And there were things that just haven't needed to be considered when these aircraft were often originally designed for a male workforce. I'm going to step sideways from here into professional identity. And women are not small men, and we know this. Proportionally, we are different. We're not just scaled down. That means that wearing things like unisex aircrew equipment assemblies designed on male anthropometrics, the kit's unlikely to fit us in most dimensions and has the potential then to not fully perform. And these are sort of proposed ideas. So G suits not inflating adequately when we've got very different waist to hip ratios. Non-specific, so non-bespoke helmets causing increased discomfort due to the skull form. So across the forehead, a female forehead will push much more into the front of a helmet than a male one. And for many of you, this probably extends into PPE through your safety-driven workplaces. Female-sized coveralls and shoes are limited. Masks are designed for the male facial form, and we've got research from COVID that highlighted the safety risks of this when a female-shaped face wasn't properly fitting into the mask. I'm sure you've all got examples of wearing wrong size safety shoes, creating trip hazards, or rolling up legs and sleeves and risking clothing catching. You don't feel professional and like you are, ready to operate in that workplace in the same way as your male colleagues. And we also all know that flying suits serve another function, identifying aircrew and serving as the perfect icebreaker in audiences to what their profession is. Some of you may have read Penny Mordaunt's recent account in the Times magazine about the iconic coronation dress that she's now putting up for sale. She wanted to design a dress that would enable her to stand next to her female cabinet colleagues and not look out of place, whilst also stand next to the large number of clergy in military uniforms and still fit in. And for Penny, she was in a fortunate position to do this. She had tailors that were ready to design this for her and cash to achieve it, which unfortunately we don't always have the drive and ability to change what's needed. It highlighted for me the challenge for our women to appear confident, professional and qualified in the roles that they do when we haven't got clothing and equipment that's designed for us. A recent anecdote was brought to my attention where a senior female aviator didn't wear her flying suit going about non-flying business sort of within senior positions. As she felt it looked like she was borrowing her dad's clothes with long sleeves and a baggy crotch. It was humiliating. But now in a room full of men in flying suits, she had to work harder to prove her credibility and qualifications in these conversations, but had, like so many of us, accepted this as part of her norm. So what can we do? I think this is the big question that, I would love to discuss more in person with you all and see what you have to say. But we must ensure that we have human factor engineers alive to the needs of all of our current and future crew, designed in both projects new and upgrading current aircraft in service. This is reassuringly happening with Tempest, and we've had some great discussions about the design of kit and equipment there. Engineers are taking the opportunity to address this collaborative aircraft project with many of you in industry pushing the importance of human equaling all and not just male applied to female. Just because we didn't hear any previous issues, it's not good enough to just say, well, the kit's fine. We've not heard anything negative. We need to actually actively research and make sure that we are not masking any problems within all of this. We've got to overturn some stones and provide opportunities for issues to be aired and not bring this male bias forward into the future because we risk just repeating the same issues for future generations. But the issues must be identified, and they're not going to spring to everyone's mind in the same way if this isn't your day-to-day experience. So we must use our female lenses, our perspective on how we intersect with our environments. The whispers then can come together. The Royal Air Force Centre of Aviation Medicine did a great job at doing this and undertook a series of female-focused fora to delve into the issues with a receptive audience. But this can only be truly effective if it's coupled with the availability of solutions, which of course come from industry. We must all be advocates for the shame-free female aviation experience. And I'm sure some of you will have your own experiences that you may wish to share sort of with the group or amongst colleagues. Interestingly, within the shift work, there was a subset within the senior women. They were lukewarm to the changes that we were trying to make within culture and normalising the female experience. We managed to publish a guide, so that the Servicewomen's Handbook, that talked about the women's physiological journey and normalised it. And this was aimed at commanders, line managers and colleagues. The military will teach you to pretty much do anything if you're a man and write a book about it, but there were some glaring holes if you're a woman. You'd probably got personal menstrual management nailed before you joined, but we then put you into the operational environments and assumed you could make it work, despite, in the case of aviation, putting you a onesie and keeping you seated for 8+ hours, and we wanted to address this now. Part of this, there were sad truths being shared with us, and so things like hiding used menstrual products for shame of putting them into the rubbish where your male colleagues might see them, waiting all day to go for a pee for fear of being watched from the desert box. But it's really rewarding and amazing to say that the UK military sort of made good gains within that 6 months, and now has menstrual support boxes that travel with deploying troops, containing everything you might need when nature unexpectedly strikes or something's happened to your own supply. And there's a urinary support device that considers where you're going to use it and is hopefully easier to use and less likely to tip down the back of your trousers, or have a spout that means everything lands on your shoes if you're going to stand to pee, which a lot of our environments, when there's mosquitoes around and very cold climates, you're not going to want to drop your trousers. But let's go back to that subset of female leaders. There were murmurings of, well, we had to put up with this. Why do they have to be special or pampered? This is the military. Don't they understand the way? It's made us tough. This almost then, with those kind of cultures and ideas, becomes a cycle of abuse. We can attract and retain those that can put up with it, but we're unlikely to expand our aperture to include women who would rather live a safer and healthier existence. And this, by the way, is not to cancel the servicewomen's narrative, all those that have come before it. These are incredible women who have done incredible things and opened doors for the changes that we're seeing in the UK military now. But we don't have to do what we've always done. And I think this is really important. We shouldn't mask risks to female health and well-being. How much more awesome could we be without these limitations and restrictions in place if we were to design for us to thrive? The women I worked with had a strong narrative, a strong identity. They didn't want to be the troublemakers. I feel decades now into professional military aviators, 50 for some of our US military colleagues. They just wanted to open doors and get on with it. And it's not unusual when we're pursuing equality that we downplay what makes us different. We just want, nothing to see here. We can do this job, and look at us, we're doing it. But the truth is, women have often had to be superheroes. Being equal is not good enough. They rarely reset the balance by being middle of the road. They are different by design. We're different by design, and should stop apologising for it and doing all of the fitting in. And I'll come back to this. Female leaders are now becoming more senior, which is fantastic. They are able to speak to their experiences without fear of sort of repercussions, and being encouraged to do that to change the culture. There are also many who have now left and experienced the aviation environments, and they are also sort of cushioned from the perceived repercussions of being the one that's standing out and making things awkward. If you've read books like Mandy Hickson's Officer Not a Gentleman, she speaks at length of some of the challenges of urinating within her normal workplace. The work of people like Sophie Antrobus and Hannah West, and they discuss it beautifully, and they have described how they've now got separation from the organisation, and as female veterans, they have the space to reflect on some of the deeply odd experiences that were normalised when sat deeply within a close-knit, homogeneous to men organisation, that you at the time were meant to feel grateful to be a part of. We changed the policies, we'd let you in, but now you have to do all the changing to actually fit in. Before I leave you with some closing thoughts, I just want to bring some research from outside aviation that I feel we should replicate in our industry. Women approaching the menopause are taking themselves out of the workforce. This is what we're hearing from the medical profession and police. If this is violently happening in our workplace, we risk losing the incredible experience and talent of our senior women who've worked so hard to get where they are and are where they are now. And we need to just make sure that there is a through life experience that makes them want to stay in this and keep doing their best. So if any of you are interested in sponsoring the research that we're going to do at King's, then again, please do get in touch. I'm going to draw to a close here, and I hope I planted some seeds for discussion. There is a lot more depth to everything said that I'll happily pick up at a later date. But I really feel this is our time to gather momentum and drive the final changes and make sure these experiences and norms that are abnormal, they're deeply odd, that we put up with, so not being being embarrassed about the fact that we menstruate. We don't want them to be carried through into the next generation. It can be done better. So a few messages for you to think about. Hopefully my message is clear. We can't optimise health and wellbeing for women in the workplace until, amongst many other things discussed today, we normalise the female experience within our aviation cultures and organisations. Specifically, organisational and cultural change and accommodation must overtake personal compromise and adaptations. This shouldn't be another burden on women within our environment. As women, we must stop feeling that we're grateful for the opportunity. We must know that we deserve to be here. And so I loved at the start that I do, we are awesome women, and we should remind ourselves of that. Don't sugarcoat your experiences. The majority of your colleagues would not even begin to consider the challenges that you have faced and may already be facing. If it's not known about, it can't be changed. So share your lived experiences and don't suffer compromise. Help those who design and design with women in mind, and not just by teams of female-only engineers, but mixed teams that understand the challenges of all and not making things into a women's problem. Don't downplay the narrative of those who have risen, but think of those who haven't risen with you. Where are they? What happened? Why aren't they now with us in this environment? So how do we reshape to ensure that we can retain these individuals in the future if we got that opportunity of a do-over? And drive the demand to improve your experience, drive the research agenda and participate in research. There are so few of us, especially sort of within flying, that we really have to make our opinions count. But this sort of undermines my earlier point that the responsibility should not just be women within the aviation and aerospace environment. We need to look to industry, we need to look to our leaders, we need to make sure that somebody wants to be the industry leader in optimizing female performance within this environment. We must be the employer who hunts down and addresses inequities, and the employer that ensures that their female staff are equally welcomed and able to thrive, so they want to stay and they can stay. Women belong in aviation and aerospace, and we deserve to thrive. Never believe that you are the problem. And thank you. I will hand it back over to the floor, and hopefully there are things changing for the better. And of course, for those who may not feel a need to share, so please do within your questions. Thank you very much for listening.
So we'll take some questions. I don't see any online. Keely, correct me if I'm wrong by typing online if there is anything that I've missed. But in the room, we have some questions. So I'll ask you to introduce yourself, name and where you're from.
State.
So,
One. Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm not hearing you now at the moment. Perfect. Yeah, got you.
You got me now? Brilliant.
Yeah.
It's so much, Gemma. I honestly felt like you were personally speaking to me, having lived through something very, very similar. My question, if you'll bear with me, how can we, and how do you think we can, support companies, particularly defence and other businesses, where there is a disconnect in the culture between the heads, the CEOs and the top, and the tactical level, the business level, and the lived experience of every day? How can we help people be honest about what women in particular are going through? And I'll just touch on sort of a second question is, how do we dispel this just get through culture? And many strong women that I've come across have been involved in this as well. It's that you can't be seen to either report this kind of harassment or mistreatment of women, but also you have to be positive and, be successful, because this is the environment and the community and the culture that we are creating is something that is negatively taken if we report bad behaviour or harassment. So I guess two questions. How do we help the top see what's happening at the bottom? And the second question is, how do we dispel this just get through culture without being seen as troublemakers?
No, absolutely. They are great questions. Thank you so much. And I think that's really what I was trying to speak to in there about why, it's taken us 30, 40, 50 years to start talking about what's normal for us. If we were starting now, that I really hope that we wouldn't be designing aircraft that excluded large swathes of the female population just because we've got this sort of anthropometric bias loop that we're designing aircraft for the people we've already got rather than those that we might want in the future. And so I think the big thing is that we have to talk, we have to share our lived experiences. And these are often taboo subjects that we've sort of suppressed because that really highlights how different we are. Gosh, we bleed, we have children, we, go to the toilet in different ways to you. But until we sort of highlight that it is different, it's a different experience and it's not catered for in this, then people aren't going to consider our view and start driving change. And that was one of the interesting things when we spoke about this research within the Air Force, was the sort of one big procurement side was just saying, well, nobody's ever raised this as an issue. Nobody has said that they need to be able to urinate on a Chinook helicopter, for an example, that's now sort of flying 7-8 hour sorties. And I think part of the problem has been that we haven't been listened to in the past. It's a view, what's the point? It's not going to drive change. I've just got to put up and shut up. So I think we've got to definitely work together across industry and the military to provide solutions that can then demonstrate that we are able to make change happen, that we are able to listen and not just sort of pay lip service to this experience. I've also got a frog in my throat now. I think your second part about the just get through culture is that we should be encouraging voices from very, very early on in their careers and not waiting until people have left. That's far too late for people to start talking about the problems and driving change, and not just when, gratefully now we are getting some fantastic women in senior positions who are willing to talk about their personal experience, but we just need to normalise female-specific forums and not sort of this group of sort of moaning women or special cases, that actually this is about your optimised performance. Men and women are physiologically and physically different. And we've done so much research so far on the male form and the male experience. And now it's time to swing the pendulum and focus on females so that we really can strike a balance in the future. So thank you for that question. I hope it answered some of what you were looking for.
Absolutely.
I had colleagues say to me, why should we create a helmet for women for F-35? We've got enough men that could fill the role. Why should we create a helmet that enables women to fly? So I thought that was quite funny and quite from a military stoic humour. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Really appreciate it.
A pleasure. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions in the room? Yes. Yeah? Yes, go ahead.
Gemma, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Hello.
Sorry, hi Gemma, Martine. I was speaking earlier. Clearly, you've done a lot of research that is transferable to other things potentially. How does your work translate into a civilian environment, and are there standards that are produced in other environments that would draw from that? I have in mind that BSI has just issued a standard helping define accommodations in the workplace for women dealing with menstruation and menopause, and that's available now. It's a standard everybody can consult. Have you fed in some of your research into that, or are they not joined up in any way and the military does its work and then standards organizations produce other accommodations for women?
Yeah, so I think my research was militarily focused because we are really trying to increase female representation in the MOD over the next, what's going to be sort of 6 years. We're hoping to increase our female intake. So the research focused on the military, but took a lot of what's coming out, because I think that there is a beautiful shift in the wider culture where women feel more able to speak up about what, is normal for us. But again, has been a taboo to sort of talk about our normal experience. You don't let anybody know you've got your period, as an example, is very normalized within our society, which sort of adds to this shame and burden. So I think we're seeing great changes, and hopefully, the research has certainly fed into
aerospace and aviation industry. And if we do sort of more projects that overlap, so things like the menopause and senior leaders, their experience, then I think we will be able to share more and more and have influence. Let it be known that there are some fabulous women in this sort of minority workplace that have shared experiences that will apply into other male-dominated cultures. So absolutely, I hope that will happen in the future, Martin.
No? Okay. Thank you so much, Gemma, for such an insightful discussion and sharing of a topic that is so important, but we tend to shy away from. So thank you so much for contributing to this.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. And I'm glad when my dog appeared, you were so houses. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so to wrap up, we're going to end on an uplifting note, and I'm going to invite Maria Casero to join us and to give our closing speech. And Maria is a seasoned aviation and travel professional with more than 30 years of experience leading companies like Ferrovial Airports, British Airways, American Airlines. She serves on the board of Heathrow and Ferrovial's AGS regional airports, driving strategic decisions and contributing to their success. So I'm going to invite Maria to speak. Thanks, Maria.
Hello. First of all, I want to say thank you. I feel very honored and humbled to be part of this very special day. And I'd like to thank Joe Moss and Keely for inviting me to this session and talk about working in a dominated male environment. Having said that, I immediately said yes. And then a few minutes later, when I hung up, this inner voice, this inner critic that is in me and has followed me most of my life started to get worried because of two main reasons. One of them was I'm not an engineer. I am nothing close to any STEM career. I studied law, and one of my biggest issues over the last 16 years I worked in Ferrovial was precisely that. I was more challenged intellectually than I was as a woman. And then secondly, because working in a very male-dominated environment, I never felt the pressure of not being able to succeed because I was a woman. So I said to myself, what am I going to share? I didn't have a good story to share with you. So I had a panic moment, which is very normal in my type of personality traits. And then suddenly, with another call with Jo, she kind of gave me a tip as to where I should start. And I wanted to share with you something that I posted a year ago on Women's International Day, which I'm going to read. That is one of my references in life, and part of the reasons that I have always continued to be fighting with myself and with everyone around me to, be in a better world and a more just world. So let me read this for a second for you. She was born in Cuba in 1937 and became a kindergarten teacher and married an incredible man. She left Cuba in 1962 with her two daughters, 2 years old and 1 year old, with an empty suitcase. It was a consequence of the revolution there in the 60s. The incredible man waited for her in Miami. They started from scratch with nothing. The incredible man became a civil engineer while working 2 shifts. She worked her shifts and took care of the family. By then, 2 boys. The boy she always wanted. They moved to New York, then to New Jersey, to a very small town with migrants joined together for a better life. After a few years, the incredible man started to travel the world to pursue his engineering career. They moved to Spain, then to Iran, to Mexico, Venezuela, Egypt, and finally back to the U.S. He followed him and took care of the children. One day back in Dallas, when the kids were already settled and running their own lives, she started a business and founded a children's company where she imported clothes from Spain. The business started to grow. She became a designer. She didn't know how to sew a button when she started. And the incredible man put aside his engineering career to help her with her payables and her receivables. That was more than 35 years ago. The family business today continues. At the age of 86, she still goes to the office. She still is very opinionated, and she still strives for more. That incredible woman was my mother, and the incredible man was my father. And I posted this on International Women's Day to honor my daughters and her daughters, and especially because my mom left the legacy to me, which was a legacy of never stop fighting for what you believe in. So with this in mind, I wanted to I wanted to put forward my experience working at Ferrovial and previously in other companies, and said to myself, okay, Maria, you buckle up, you look for the real story, and you get on a plane, put the chart, and take the flight and try to share with you what has been my inspiration, what has been my obstacles, and what have been my supporters during this year. So I read to get prepared, I read the McKinsey Global Institute Women's Report in the Workplace, and I stumbled on a term I was not familiar with. I had never heard that term before, which is the broken rung. And the broken rung, I'm not sure if that has been mentioned today during the event, explains that at entry level, it's very balanced. You have a 51% male participation and a 49% women participation. And as you move up the ladder, the balance starts to shift towards the more male environment, male population. And only of that 49%, 22% end up being in senior leadership roles. God, that made me think. Actually, preparing for today made me think a lot about, how to continue to contribute to making things better. So clearly, following that rung theory, I was one of that 22%. And I said to myself, okay, when did I get my first managerial role? And I got my first managerial role back in the 1990s when I was working in American Airlines. My role in American Airlines was within a reservations department. I was a reservations agent, and it was predominantly female. Then I went to ask myself the question, well, what would have happened if I would have joined Ferrovial when I was in my 20s? Would I be in the position I am today? And at the beginning, I didn't want to answer myself that question, but I really think I would be in that position, the position I am today. And this is what I'm going to be talking about. So I was born in Cuba, and I was brought up to be a mother and have children. And that's a fact. That was the mentality. Cuba was, part of a small island in the Caribbean. And I was brought up in a very conservative environment. And I needed to be a mother, and I needed to marry and to have children. There was only one slight difference, is that after the Cuban Revolution, having left as a migrant to the United States and then to Spain, my dad always said, your role is to get married, to be a mom, but you have to be economically independent. So having kept that in mind, I went to study law. And I studied law, not because I really liked law or there was anything special about it. It was just happened to be very trendy and fashionable at the time. Finished law in 1984 and married 6 months later and had my daughter literally 2 years later. So life seemed to be following the predictable path that I had embarked with and where I was brought up with, until a job goes from being a nice to have to going to being a need. My husband lost his job, and as a family, both of us had to, start looking for opportunities and get a job. And the level of frustration and the level of learning during that period really changed my way of thinking. I sent over 300 CVs. I went to more than 20 interviews. And there was beautiful rejections of, don't call us, we'll call you. After more than a year, I continued to be without a job. So I said, okay, I'm not going to get a job in a company in anything related to law or similar. So let's open up to whatever opportunity is available. And at those times, jobs were posted in newspapers. They weren't job platforms and offers like they are today. So I read the newspaper every single day and looking for new jobs. And I saw an ad in the newspaper that said Madrid, Dallas, Dallas, Madrid, American Airlines startup in Madrid, flight free. So I said, God, this is my moment. They don't ask for any type of qualification. All you have to know is speak English, and I'm the perfect candidate. So there I go. I called, and it was a telephone conversation. They interviewed in English, and then they said, okay, we'll give you a call back. For 4 times, I had an interview with 4 different people, and I never got the call back. So desperate, because I could not understand what else was required from me, I looked up where the company was going to be based, what offices they were going to be based, and got on my best suit, my best suit literally, and went and knocked on the door. When I knocked on the door, a man opened the door, and the man said to me, "Good morning, how can I help you?" And I said, "My name is Maria Casero, and I want to look in this company." And, kind of startled. He said, well, and I heard his accent, and I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "I'm Cuban." And I said, "Well, I'm Cuban also." And he opened the door and let me in. That was the beginning of a sponsor for me in life. He sent me to the reservation supervisor and said to the person that was managing it, "I have a person that speaks the language and is able, wants to work in this company." And she wants to work, so give her an opportunity. Oh, so great. Had my conversation, and then the person tells me, "You have to be, I don't remember the day in February, you have to be at the airport. Make sure you take with you some carry-on. You're going standby. Your trip will be Madrid, Paris, New York, Dallas, and then you'll be going to the Learning Center of American for 4 weeks." And I just got blank. I had a 2-year-old baby, 3-year-old, that I needed to take with me because I lived alone in Spain. And I said to the man, I have to take my child with me, but don't worry, my mom and dad live there. I'll just leave her there and I'll go to the learning center. "Oh no, you can't travel with a standby ticket with 3 stops and go to Dallas. So this is not the right time. So, call me in a couple of years." And I went home. I was completely devastated. I sat down with my husband, and my husband said, "Okay, let's do this. We're going to ask for a loan, and we're going to get you on that plane with Christina, my daughter." We asked for $600 of 1987, which was a huge amount of money for unemployed. I got on my plane. I took my girl with me. I left her with my mom and dad, and I studied like I never studied before in my life because I owed $600 and I needed to make sure I got a job. Because one of the catches was you went to Dallas without a contract, and only if you passed your tests, you would get your contract. And the test was literally learning more than 300 city pair codes. I could just memorize every single city pair in the world to make sure I got my test. The day I got my grade, and they told me that I was a very good reservations agent, it was the happiest day of my life at that time. And I just went home to my family and said, I did it. After a year and a half looking for something to do, I finally got my job. So this is how I started to work in life. And this is how I started to push my boundaries over and over again. After starting in America, I worked for 3 other companies, and in 2007, and by the way, they were always very female dominated. It was the airline environment, the call centers, and even in the branches, because when you work in branches, the headquarters was in London or the headquarters was in DFW. When you work in branches, they tend to be more family oriented. They're smaller teams, and reservations tends to have a higher amount of women in those days that there are today. Today is much more mixed. In 2007, I got a call from a headhunter. I had never been headhunted. It was all voice to voice. And the headhunter said to me, RAeS is looking for a person with experience in the aviation industry, and what do you think? And I said, well, no thanks. It's a construction company. I don't have a clue what that means. And, I think you got the wrong person. The headhunter explained what RAeS had done in the past. It had just acquired BAA. BAA had several airports, And I said to myself, okay, let's give it a chance. Let's go. Let's go and see what happens. Well, I took the challenge, and my God, were the first 6 months dreadful. I have never felt worse in my life. Remember, I come from a very, soft, it's not soft. I studied law. It was more humanities. I don't know how you say this word in English correctly, but it's in Spain, you say humanidades, which is more history, legal. I did not have any type of financial engineering, STEM orientated background. And it was a company that was black and white engineering and black and white finance. So during the first 6 months, I literally drowned in the weight of the concrete on my head. I didn't understand the language. I felt ignored. I got into the office, into the conference room from my execs, and I would sit at the other end of the table just to be further ignored. I felt insignificant for about 6 months. And it was about me at this point. I really felt insignificant. So one day I said, this is over, I'm resigning. I went to see the CEO, which I am so grateful for, and another one of the sponsors in my life. And I said to him, look, I made a mistake. You made a mistake. I'm not the person you need. I'm not able to manage this. I'm ignored. No one answers the phone. I think, I'll stay until we find a replacement, but I'm lost. So he listened to me and then kept silence for a few seconds and said to me, Maria, no one resigns on my watch, which was very startling for me. And I really loved the phrase that then Jon Snow did a lot in the Night Watch, which is a series that was very interesting. No one resigns on my watch. And go on holidays. It was July. Think about it. Come back in September. It needs a couple of years to adapt to a new environment. So that's what I did. And he said, by the way, don't take your phone so you relax. I said, don't worry, I'm not going to use my phone because no one calls me. So I don't need a phone to go on holidays. So I went on holidays. And I was a fighter. I went with my friends, my family. It was kind of this big trip that you do once in a lifetime. It was 40 of us. And people that surrounded me and cared for me said, well, why are you retiring? Why are you giving up? And after a lot of conversations, I decided to go back and I decided to fight this battle. And I decided to make it a purpose to be able to fit in and to get the best of me out of me in this environment, because it was an industry I had passion for. So it wasn't a road of roses. But during that period, and for the last 16 years, I retired from Ferrovial October last year I'm pursuing now a portfolio career. And when I left Ferrovial last October, the sense of belonging was just absolutely incredible. And that is very much due to the people I found in the journey. And the people I found in the journey showed me how to navigate these type of environments. I have had directors, CEOs, incredibly proactive at the time of supporting women in the workplace, incredibly proactive at the time of managing development opportunities, managing communication opportunities, managing how to navigate, which is very, very important. Basic rules to make it feel that it's not personal. And of course, there are environments that are very different to what I have lived. And that's something I want to really emphasize it. I was not working in an environment where I felt hostility. It was difficult, more from an intellectual point of view, not speaking the same language than it was from being a female. Having said that, there is so much to do to make sure that we boost what is a natural progression to the world. Because if we look at our industry, aviation and aerospace, a lot of people are going to be retiring within the next decade. There's shortage of skills everywhere you look. Childbirth is declining to minimums, countries like Spain, less than 1%. Men and women need to work together. to make sure that these skills are available. And for that to be available, there has to be equal opportunities for everyone. So the timing now is a great timing for the younger generations that had it much more difficult than many of us had at the beginning. But I am very hopeful that working together, it's possible. So when thinking about what the future looks like for me and for my grandchildren, I have 3 beautiful granddaughters. I think that there are many P's that I refer to when I talk about how to progress in the corporate life or in the business or in your personal life. You have to have passion, you have to have a purpose, and you have to be surrounded by the right people. You have to work a lot, and there's an element of luck. I have no doubt that there's an element of luck when you combine all that together. So what needs to happen for, what type of battery life do we need to have women propel in industries that are very, very low in participation, like the aviation industry, like the pilots, like firefighters, and construction, which is where I come from. I think there's 3 P's along with the other P's that I talked about: passion, purpose, and people that need to come together dramatically for this shift in the aviation industry, which is changing completely the world, the way people travel, with the vertiport business and the eVTOL business, which I was lucky to be able to be part of until last year. What are those P3s? We need, and I did this analogy, women in P3. P3 is a model that we use as airport investors, where the public sector, the private sector come together in partnership to invest in infrastructure. Those P's are critical for our future. It is the public sector. The public sector, the law needs to continue to be able to put in place laws, policies that help us with equality in the workplace. Review healthcare, review elderly care, because it's not only about children and childcare, it's elderly care. Women take on many roles that, we tend to forget that exist. Elderly care is getting more and more important because we are living longer lives. The private sector, the recruitment process, end-to-end recruitment process needs to be completely gender biased. There are some laws, legislations, and countries that even now force, or by law, you're not allowed to put your name, your picture, or your postcode in a CV. The postcode, your zip code, tells you where you come from. So that immediately pushes into a bias towards the person that is filling up that CV. And then we have the partnerships. And this is, for me, one of the most important P's I come across in my life. Partnerships lead to sponsorship. And being sponsored, the visibility that sponsors give a man or a woman, in my case, I have had more male sponsors than women sponsors, but every one of those sponsors let you be what you want to be. They open doors, they open opportunities, and you have to take them. So when I think about those sponsors across my life, Heathrow for me is an incredible example of an incredible place where John Colin, which left Heathrow at the same time almost I did, or Paula Stanek, the HR director, their mission is to look for women and gender equality. It's difficult, of course, and when you start at the bottom of the pyramid, when you have roles that are airport security, you have a 50-50. You're going to have the same number of women and men going through security, but it also starts to fall apart in the middle road. Boosting, identifying women, girls, boys from the very beginning is what's going to make our world change. It's only through going to schools, talking in universities, bringing those opportunities that we will be able to be part of the change that the world needs to get us to where we want to be. And only that way, through education, through visibility, through sponsorships, do I see the world changing. And it's all about us. We have a huge responsibility as women to help others get to the, when you run, you get to the meta. I don't know how you say meta. To get to the line where you just cut the ribbon, we have a huge responsibility as women, along with the public sector, along with the public sector, to make sure that we put in that path that will take the younger generations to where they belong. And I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, especially because I had an opportunity to really also review my path and where I got to, which I'm very proud of. But it's been a struggle, and I've taken advantage of it. So thank you very much for this opportunity, Jill and Kelly.
Thank you so much, Maria. I wanted to end on an uplifting note after all the hard topics we faced today, and that was incredibly uplifting and inspiring. So thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Christine, you've got the task of doing a 1 minute spotlight on one. So I don't envy you.
Not sure how to slide to those in.
I've got a couple of slides. Yeah, I just thank you personally again to all of our fantastic speakers today, and for all of you for coming. I'm so sorry that we've overrun, but there's just been so much to cover, and I hope that you found it as valuable as I have. So just from my perspective to close, I really wanted to mention the Alta mentoring platform, and mentoring I think did come up a few times in the talks today, and sponsorship and helping each other along. And there are flyers, I think, on the tables down here and upstairs with a little QR code on, which takes you to altamentoring.com, where you could sign up to be a mentor, a mentee. And there are also training modules on there, which are really helpful either for yourself or to recommend to a colleague, covering all sorts of useful content. So please do take one of those flyers and take that QR code and go and check out that fabulous resource that's Alta Mentoring. It's one of our committee members is chairs Alta. She works at UE, Professor Sue Durbin. And up on the screen there are the founding companies of the Alta platform. And there's a number of companies that have signed up as well to Alta. So again, if you want to get your organization involved, if they're not already, then please do. And it's the platform's underpinned by academic data and research, and I describe it as having never done online dating, but I describe it as almost like an online dating app. So it will match you as a mentor to a mentee and vice versa. So it's really clever. I move that along. Can I get the next slides, please? We're listing those at the back. I think they're just some of the corporate sponsors. And then the final slide just gives an overview, if you have to click through it, of the different training modules that are available on the altamentoring.com website. So yeah, please take a look at that one. And then the final slide is wheeling back around to our Women in Aviation, Aerospace and Space Committee. And I think, and there's lots of ways that you could get involved and help us out. There's a few of us here today, so please come and chat in the networking drinks afterwards. Some information up there on the screen, and an email address if you want to reach out. But yeah, we've got short-term roles that people can do, always looking for support from companies. There are ways to make a one-off donation to support an activity that the WASC can do. We hold an annual lecture, the Amy Johnson Lecture here, which is a great event. We're probably going to do that in September this year. So sponsorship can help us make that even more special. We've talked about Alta already and becoming a supporting partner there. And we haven't set out a full schedule of events for the rest of this year, but there are certainly some themes from today that we'd really like to take forward in our work. And we'll be reflecting on the feedback that we got from all of you during the roundtables. So thank you for that. And if we are doing events, please come along if you can in person. We'll try and make them as accessible as possible so you can join online and catch up afterwards if you can't make it. And spread the word. We can all be ambassadors. And we talked about, joining Alta. So hopefully that leaves you a few other practical things that you can take out today. But again, sincere thanks from me, and I'll hand over to Carissa to wrap up. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. So today we provided a vital platform for meaningful dialogue. We have collated and noted tangible actions to take forward to address gender inequity. We've covered critical topics, including addressing harassment, duty of care, the gender pay and promotion gap, caregiving responsibilities, and why we must teach ourselves and young women to be brave, not perfect. I hope you found today's President's event valuable, and you leave here equipped with some helpful insights and feeling informed, inspired, and empowered. By show of hands in the room, would we like to do this again next year? Okay, and I'll ask Keely to take note of the online hands and comments, please. Thank you. Okay, so I want to thank all of our speakers here at 4 Hamilton Place and online for sharing their remarkable presentations and driving constructive discussions. I want to thank the members of the Society, the Women in Aerospace and Aviation and Space Committee, for shaping this event with me. Thank you. And facilitating the roundtable discussions as well. And I want to thank my team here at 4HP, Keely, Pearl, Gustavo, Mary, Lauren, Jonathan, Bella, Carol, for supporting, and the AV team who went through a loop and said, I want this event to be inclusive, accessible, and international for women everywhere to participate. So let's find a way to get that done. And I want to thank, of course, the audience in person and online for your participation and contributions. I also want to thank the men who came to this event today. So you are an important part of this conversation. So thank you for being here, or else we're just talking to ourselves. So thank you. And I know we have plans to do a deep dive session on male allyship. It's why it wasn't on the agenda for today, because we took it off so that we can do something bespoke for that, just that. So look out for that. So yes, with that, let us continue to work together to catalyze tangible progress towards workplace inclusivity and gender equality, because the positive impact is not just for ourselves and our global economy, but for the generations that will come after us. So please join me for networking drinks, and please have a happy International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you.